Chapter 142. Old Taoist Jinyang. Lord Taoist Jinghe broke into Lord Taoist Jinyang's cave in an imposing manner and shouted like an enemy, "Come out!" Lord Taoist Jinyang's cave was as simple as most cultivators, but it didn't lack anything it should have. As one of the 4 or 5 late-stage nascent soul cultivators in the Celestial Pole and the person with the highest power in Shenqing School, Lord Taoist Jinyang's cave was naturally heavily guarded with numerous restrictions. If an enemy really came, he wouldn't be able to do anything. However, it was Lord Taoist Jinghe, so the guarding disciples could only helplessly let him come and go as he pleased. Lord Taoist Jinyang, who was cultivating, opened his eyes and waved his hand to remove the restrictions around him, letting Lord Taoist Jinghe in. Different from Lord Taoist Jinghe's style of a fatuous ruler, Lord Taoist Jinyang wore a simple sect Taoist robe and tied his hair in a bun. He looked calm and composed, looking like a real expert with a transcendent demeanor. Seeing Lord Taoist Jinghe breaking into his cave, Lord Taoist Jinyang just raised his eyelids and then lowered them again. His voice was gentle and calm. "What's up? What's up? You're asking me what's up?" Lord Taoist Jinghe yelled. "Old Taoist Jinyang, are you jealous of me because I accepted a genius disciple but don't dare to say it?" Not to mention Shenqing School, perhaps only Lord Taoist Jinghe would talk to Lord Taoist Jinyang like this in the entire Celestial Pole. Lord Taoist Jinyang was also a genius in the past. He advanced to the nascent soul realm when he was about 200 years old and advanced to the late stage of the nascent soul realm when he was about 600 years old. From then on, he roamed the Celestial Pole for hundreds of years, and only 3 or 4 late-stage nascent soul cultivators could rival him. The reason why he couldn't be sure was that one of the old monsters in the late stage of the nascent soul realm had been living in seclusion for a long time and no one knew whether he was still alive or not. As for Lord Taoist Jinghe, his cultivation experience couldn't be regarded as the best in either Shenqing School or the Celestial Pole. He could only be regarded as excellent. However, only Lord Taoist Jinghe talked like this, and Lord Taoist Jinyang listened. There were reasons for this. First, although Lord Taoist Jinghe's cultivation level was only in the middle stage of the nascent soul realm, he was combative by nature and had a deep understanding of fights of magical powers. He had treasures and secret techniques in his hands, so even great cultivators in the late stage of the nascent soul realm wouldn't dare to say they could win against him for sure. Second, his temperament was like this. Lord Taoist Jinyang knew this very well, so why would he fight with him over this trivial matter? Therefore, even though Lord Taoist Jinghe was making a big fuss, Lord Taoist Jinyang still looked indifferent and didn't even glance at him. "You have your own disciple and I have mine. Why should I be jealous of you?" "Not jealous?" Lord Taoist Jinghe sneered. "If you're not jealous, why did you let your disciple seduce my disciple?" This sentence made Lord Taoist Jinyang a little confused, so he raised his eyelids. "Hook up." This choice of words was really inelegant, but Lord Taoist Jinghe continued to sneer. "Don't tell me you don't know. You took in a disciple with a single spiritual root and treated him like a treasure. I don't believe you don't know about such a big matter, as him seducing my disciple." Lord Taoist Jinghe deliberately emphasized the word big matter. He raised his eyebrows and looked at Lord Taoist Jinyang from the corner of his eyes, meaning, "Don't try to fool me." "You mean Yanfei?" Lord Taoist Jinyang raised his eyes. There were only a few disciples with a single spiritual root in Shenqing School, so he only needed to think for a moment to know who Lord Taoist Jinghe was talking about. "You're not muddle-headed yet." Lord Taoist Jinghe ridiculed him. Soon after, he said in a seemingly sincere tone, "I say, Old Taoist Jinyang, my disciple is very good, but you still have to ask me whether I can seduce him or not. Otherwise, wouldn't it be very bad if we hurt our friendship?" Lord Taoist Jinyang wasn't fooled by his words. He just asked, "What's going on? Either speak properly or don't waste time." The only person in Shenqing School who could talk to Lord Taoist Jinghe like this was Lord Taoist Jinyang. Lord Taoist Jinghe knew this old Taoist was impatient, so he should stop while he was ahead. He immediately chose to speak nicely. "I don't know what wrong medicine your disciple took, but he's been so attentive to my disciple that my disciple doesn't even dare to go out." "What? You really don't know?" "How could I know such a trivial matter?" After hearing the whole story, Lord Taoist Jinyang couldn't help but have a headache. This Jinghe was really something. Did he really have to report to his master that his disciple was attentive to a woman who was as free as him? He was already in the nascent soul realm, but he still came to question his disciple over such a trivial matter? Nevertheless, he still slowed down his voice to confirm. "You mean Yanfei is pursuing your disciple? And the little disciple you just accepted, right?" "Yes." Lord Taoist Jinghe nodded, then put his hand on Lord Taoist Jinyang's shoulder. He once again said earnestly, Senior Martial Brother Jinyang, don't say I didn't give you face. My disciple is good, but I really can't give her to your disciple. Tell your disciple not to worry, okay? Lord Taoist Jinyang was confused. My disciple is unmarried and your disciple isn't. Is there a problem? Is such a trivial matter worth you coming here in person? Lord Taoist Jinghe was furious. Trivial matter? I'm telling you this isn't a trivial matter. He looked around mysteriously, then leaned close to Lord Taoist Jinyang and said in a low voice, This disciple of mine was brought back by my brat. You also know what kind of personality that brat has. It's so rare for him to bring back a girl. Right now, he's in a hurry to form his nascent soul and can't take care of this matter. If I don't take care of her for him, he'll be angry with me when he comes out of closed-door meditation. Lord Taoist Jinghe then added, You should tell your disciple not to pester my disciple anymore. It's useless even if she thinks about it. Lord Taoist Jinyang already understood what Lord Taoist Jinghe said, but Lord Taoist Jinghe complacently added, which made him unhappy. Your disciple has his own good points, but my disciple has a single spiritual root that's hard to come by in 100 years. She's young and promising and her future is bright. Why would he pester your disciple? I think he's just bored and wants to talk to your disciple. You shouldn't think too much about young people's interactions. I'm thinking too much? Lord Taoist Jinghe shouted. If I'm really thinking too much, would that brat keep asking my disciple out? Old Taoist Jinyang, don't just protect your disciple. Although your disciple has a single spiritual root, compared to my disciple she's just SOSO. Do you want to know what my disciple's aptitude is? I won't tell you first. Lord Taoist Jinyang's face darkened when he saw Lord Taoist Jinghe blowing his own trumpet. All right, don't treat your disciple like a treasure. There are many people who want to perform dual cultivation with my disciple. Do you need to rush to please your disciple? What are you worrying about? Hey old Taoist Jinyang, you're jealous? Jealous? I'm jealous? I have a disciple with a single spiritual root. Do I need to be jealous of you? Is such a trivial matter worth you coming here in person? Go back. Lord Taoist Jinyang was annoyed that his disciple kept being belittled. He flung his sleeve and ordered him to leave. Do you think I'll go back just because you tell me to? Lord Taoist Jinghe argued with him. I'm telling you, my disciple has the spiritual root of the origin. You know what the spiritual root of the origin is, right? She even obtained the art of the origin and is in the middle stage of the foundation building realm before she's 30. Can your disciple do it? She only has a single spiritual root. She's still far from being able to catch up to my disciple. Spiritual root of the origin? Lord Taoist Jinyang was fuming, but when he heard that, he paused for a moment. Your disciple has the spiritual root of the origin from the distant past era? Yes. Lord Taoist Jinghe raised his head. The next moment, Lord Taoist Jinyang sneered. So what if she has the spiritual root of the origin? It's been lost for hundreds of thousands of years. I don't know what will happen to it. My disciple has a solid single spiritual root. She can't be that bad. Old Taoist Jinyang. Lord Taoist Jinghe was waiting for Lord Taoist Jinyang to admit defeat a moment ago, but when he heard what Lord Taoist Jinghe said, he also fumed. What's the use of a single spiritual root? How many of us nascent soul cultivators have single spiritual roots? Old man Song Feng has 3 spiritual roots, but you still can't beat him. Lord Taoist Jinyang was also angry when he heard Lord Taoist Jinghe mentioning this. When did I lose to him? It's just that the winner hasn't been decided yet. Then he said sarcastically, haven't you always looked down on old man Song Feng? Why are you speaking for him now? You also have a single spiritual root. Isn't a single spiritual root good? How did you cultivate it? It's because I have a single spiritual root that I don't speak for it. What's so great about a single spiritual root? Many people with single spiritual roots can't even cultivate to the nascent soul realm. Lord Taoist Jinghe was already pestering him endlessly. Lord Taoist Jinyang was so angry that he laughed. Qin Jinghe, you're itching for a beating, aren't you? I'll fulfill your wish. As he spoke, he took out something, clasped his hands together, and threw it at Lord Taoist Jinghe. Lord Taoist Jinghe flashed, and a surge of spiritual aura blasted a stone wall into ashes. He was also burning with anger. He took out a gourd, raised it, and a wisp of real fire spurted out of the gourd. He shouted, Old man Jinyang, if I don't teach you a lesson you'll really think I'm easy to bully. Lord Taoist Jinyang didn't speak. Instead, he withdrew his magic weapon and attacked again. Mo Chenga naturally didn't know that her casual words caused the two most powerful nascent soul cultivators in Shenqing school to fight each other and almost raze Lord Daoist Jinyang's Immortal's cave to the ground. Of course, this was actually because Lord Daoist Jinghe was too good at stirring up trouble. Anything he said would make people unhappy, and it didn't have much to do with her. At that moment, she stepped into Yi Xinji's small room with a solemn expression. 2 years had passed. Yi Xinji had grown a lot taller, and his cultivation level had also improved. A few days ago he finished his studies at Mingxue Hall and became an official disciple. Because the distribution of elite disciples and ordinary disciples was different, their management methods were also different. Since Yi Xinji lived in Shangqing Palace, the steward's hall couldn't interfere too much, and it was difficult to stop other people's mouths. Thus, Lord Daoist Jinghe waved his hand and directly indicated that Yi Xinji should be recorded as Master Daoist Shoujing's disciple. Mo Chenga originally didn't approve of this. Why should she record a child she taught herself as someone else's disciple? Especially when that person basically didn't care about him. But Lord Daoist Jinghe said that she was only in the middle stage of the foundation building realm now. No matter how fast her cultivation was, it would still take her 50 to 60 years to form her gold core. By that time, Yi Xinji should have already built his foundation. The method of distributing foundation building pills to elite disciples and ordinary disciples was also different. Did Lord Daoist Jinghe want to drag him into building his foundation? For this reason, Mo Chenga could only acquiesce. Now Yi Xinji still lived here and hadn't even seen his nominal master. Mo Chenga walked to the frost jade bed and saw Yi Xinji lying on the bed. She frowned slightly and helped the child up. She placed her hand on the top of his head and inserted her spiritual aura into his body. After a long time Yi Xinji groaned and woke up. When he saw her, he called out in a low voice, "Auntie." Mo Chenga let go of him and said, "Aren't you going to take some medicine to heal your injuries?" Yi Xinji's face reddened. He hurriedly took out some medicinal pills and ate them, then sat cross-legged. Mo Chenga stayed by his side, quietly observing his condition. Just now, when she was cultivating, she used her divine sense to pay attention to the outside world. Suddenly, she noticed spiritual aura fluctuations here. After careful examination, she found that the spiritual aura inside Yi Xinji's body was in disorder and showed signs of being possessed by the devil. Just now, when she placed her hand on the top of Yi Xinji's head, she immediately realized what was wrong. This child obviously ate several aura-converging pills. The medicinal power was too strong and he couldn't control it, so he almost suffered from the devil. Before long, the spiritual aura inside Yi Xinji's body finally calmed down. When he opened his eyes, he saw Mo Chenga standing in front of him with a gloomy expression. He immediately lowered his head and said, "Auntie, I'm sorry." Mo Chenga regained her composure and shook her head. "Sorry for what?" "I made you worry." Mo Chenga sighed and sat next to him. "What does it matter if you made me worry? In the end, you'll be the one to bear the consequences. You didn't cultivate for me, you cultivated for yourself." "Yes," Yi Xinji answered. He then hesitated and asked, "Auntie, don't you blame me?" "Blame you for what?" Just now something happened because I ate aura-converging pills. Don't you blame me for acting recklessly?" Mo Chenga smiled. "What's the use of blaming you? The most important thing is that you won't make the same mistake again. If you feel uncomfortable, you can tell me why you ate so many aura-converging pills. Don't tell me you never thought there would be problems." "This?" Yi Xinji paused for a moment, then answered honestly, "I think my cultivation speed is too slow, so I wanted to eat more medicinal pills to speed up my cultivation." Slow cultivation. Mo Chenga couldn't help but laugh. "You're only 12 years old, but you're already in the 3rd layer of the aura refining realm. How could it be slow?" "But Hualing is the same age as me, and he's already in the 5th layer of the aura refining realm." Hualing was the youngest disciple of Lord Daoist Jinghe's second disciple, Master Daoist Mingxin. Because he was the same age as Yi Xinji, he could be considered Yi Xinji's little playmate. Mo Chenga smiled. "Hualing is your martial uncle Mingxin's blood-related descendant. His spiritual roots are also better than yours, and he's been carefully taught since he was a child. How could he be the same as you?" Upon hearing what she said, Yi Xinji pursed his lips and his gaze dimmed. "I know my aptitude isn't comparable to his, but if that's the case, doesn't that mean I'll never be able to catch up to him for the rest of my life?" "Of course not." Mo Chenga stroked his head. "On the path of cultivation, aptitude isn't enough. You might not be able to catch up to him now, but as long as you continue to cultivate earnestly, you'll eventually catch up. Besides, in the past 2 years, you've advanced 2 layers from the first layer to the third layer, while Hualing barely advanced to the 5th layer a few days ago. What are you afraid of? Seeing that Yi Junji lowered his head and didn't say anything, Mo Qingge knew he was still unconvinced, so she said with a smile, "Then let's do it this way. You'll spend 10 years cultivating earnestly. Let's see if you'll build your foundation first or if he'll build it first. What do you think?" Yi Junji thought about it. He still had a high chance of advancing to the foundation building realm within 10 years, so he smiled and said, "N. But let's make this clear. You can't do things like you did today, pulling up seedlings to help them grow. Cultivation has to be done step by step. Being too impatient won't do you any good. If you're careless and end up suffering from chi deviation, you'll have to delay your cultivation for many years. The gains won't make up for the losses." "All right, I'll listen to Auntie." On the other side, Lord Daoist Jinghe had just finished his fight. His luxurious golden dragon robe had already been burnt to ashes, and his face was also stained with a lot of unknown ash or soil. Even half of his beautiful short beard was burnt. He was in a sorry state. He flew back to Clear Spring Peak angrily. As he flew, he muttered, "Old Daoist Jinyang, I gave you face today. If I used the Great Yang technique, even if you didn't die, you'd still be half dead. Humph, I'll let you off for the sake of us being fellow disciples." The old Taoist Jinyang he spoke of was currently directing his disciples to tidy up the cave with a dark expression. He himself called his youngest disciple over and locked him in a relatively intact stone room before he started scolding him. "Brat, you're too bored, aren't you? Instead of cultivating diligently, you went to seduce that old fool Qin Jinghe's disciple? You could have fallen for anyone, but that old fool is a complete scoundrel. If the upper beam is crooked, the lower beam will be crooked. How good can his disciple be? If you behave yourself, I'll forget about this matter." Bai Yanfei was bewildered by his scolding. "Master, I told you about this." Lord Taoist Jinyang was stunned. "You told me? When did you tell me?" "Last time, when you were cultivating, I said I wanted to find someone to perform dual cultivation with, and you said I could do whatever I wanted." Thinking about it carefully, Lord Taoist Jinyang seemed to have said that. He couldn't help feeling embarrassed, but he still scolded him angrily. "I said you could do whatever you wanted, but you really did? There are many beautiful female cultivators with high cultivation levels in our sect. How did you fall for that old fool's disciple?" This time he didn't even want to call him Qin Jinghe. He just directly called him old fool. Bai Yanfei felt even more wronged. "I said I'd choose from the several martial uncles, but you agreed. I looked around and only senior martial sister Mo was suitable, but you still didn't tell me." Lord Taoist Jinyang thought for a while, then said angrily, "Doesn't your martial uncle Miaoi also have a girl? I remember she's not that old and she's also suitable for you. Why didn't you choose her?" Bai Yanfei cautiously looked at his master and said, "That senior martial sister Wu doesn't look too." He didn't finish his sentence, but how could Lord Taoist Jinyang not understand? Lord Taoist Jinyang glared at him. "You, as a cultivator, why are you so fixated on appearances? Whether they're beautiful or ugly, they're just bones under the skin. Besides, how ugly could a cultivator be? That old fool's disciple isn't that beautiful." Seeing his furious master, Bai Yanfei cleverly shut his mouth and stopped talking. Now that his master had a falling out with martial uncle Jinghe, saying anything more would only add fuel to the fire. Lord Taoist Jinyang paced around the room twice, then said, "Let's just forget about this matter. You don't need to think about this girl anymore. That old fool was prepared to give her to his boy. It's not your turn." Bai Yanfei was dumbfounded. "Master, what do you mean?" "What I mean is that girl belongs to Qin Shoujing. Do you understand now?" This news shocked Bai Yanfei, but he quickly shouted, "What does it have to do with him?" I asked, and senior martial sister Mo clearly has no intention of performing dual cultivation. "That's also none of your business." Lord Taoist Jinyang looked at his disciple and sneered. "All right, brat, be a bit smarter. I had a falling out with that old fool, but you still went to provoke his disciple. Are you trying to humiliate me? Let's just forget about this matter. If you want to perform dual cultivation, just pick someone else." Lord Taoist Jinyang swung his sleeves, then turned around and left the stone room. Although Bai Yanfei understood his master wasn't sneering at him, he still gnashed his teeth. Chapter 143. A grayish humanoid object landed on a remote hilltop on the Clear Spring Peak. It stealthily looked around, and after confirming that there was no one around, it went to the front of an immortal's cave. It clasped its palms together and cast a set of hand seals to open the outer restriction, then entered the stone door. As soon as he entered he shouted, where are you?" He walked through the stone path, entered the hall and skillfully chose a stone door. After another set of hand seals, the stone door opened, and a handsome but gloomy face greeted him. But when this face saw him, it immediately turned into astonishment. Lord Daoist Jinghe carelessly wiped his face, causing his entire face to become even darker. She couldn't help but frown and ask, "What did you do? Why did you make yourself like this?" Lord Daoist Jinghe looked down at himself, still sitting in front of him indifferently, and pointed at his nose. "It's because of you." "Because of me?" She raised his eyebrows suspiciously. He absolutely didn't believe this. How could he not know what kind of moral character this master was? How many years had it been since he called his name? Every time he called him lad? Now that he suddenly called his name so warmly, he must have done something ridiculous to please him. Sure enough, Lord Daoist Jinghe looked around to make sure there was no one else in his immortal's cave, then mysteriously approached him. "It's because of you that I fought with old man Xinjiang." "Brat, what's with your expression?" Lord Daoist Jinghe rolled up his sleeves. "I fought for you to this extent, but you're not moved at all?" She calmly said, "Tell me what happened first." Being dragged back to the main topic, Lord Daoist Jinghe glared at him for a long time, but in the end he couldn't help but proudly take credit. "Old man Xinjiang's disciple wanted to steal your wife, so I fought with him." "My wife?" She asked slowly, "When did I have a wife?" "Oh, you still won't admit it?" Lord Daoist Jinghe stared at him with a, "You don't have to be embarrassed," expression. "Jinghe, I know you don't want to tell me now, but it's okay. I won't tell anyone. I'll wait for you." Slowly. Before he finished speaking, he automatically stopped because Shi's face was already gloomy. "Master." "What?" Lord Daoist Jinghe wanted to stroke his beard, but in the end, his hand was covered in dust. He then patted his clothes in annoyance, causing the black dust and dirt in the entire stone room to fly everywhere. She glared at him angrily, but he didn't know what to say. After a long time, his expression finally softened. "Master, if you have nothing to do, why don't you go out and experience the world? Now that your cultivation level is high enough, you should look for fated chances to advance to the late stage." His voice was very calm, and his words sounded as if he was thinking for the other party's sake. However, everyone could tell that a storm was brewing. Upon hearing Shi's tone, Lord Daoist Jinghe involuntarily shrank back, but in the next second he shouted boldly and confidently, "Stinky brat, what's with your attitude? I've risked my life for you. I've even lost my image and you're talking to me like this?" She felt he was already very restrained, but when he heard what she said, he couldn't control the fire in his heart and it suddenly flared up. He couldn't help but tighten his face. "Master, there should be a limit to your recklessness." Lord Daoist Jinghe obviously didn't know where the limit was. Upon hearing what she said, he stomped his foot again. "Act recklessly? You're actually saying I act recklessly? You, if it weren't for your awkward temperament, would I have to look after your wife at such an old age? Let me tell you, who told you she's my wife?" She also couldn't help but shout. "You actually took this kind of non-existent matter seriously. You've lived for 800 years, but where did your brain go?" Lord Daoist Jinghe had lived for 800 years, but he was still despised by a junior. God knew where his brain went, but he only knew that his self-esteem was hurt. His expression turned fierce. "Stinky brat. Do you think I don't know what you're thinking? You've been like this since you were a child. You obviously want to die, but you're unwilling to say it. If I don't look after you for you, you can go cry in the future." Lord Daoist Jinghe shouted fiercely like an elder, but she didn't buy it at all. "Don't take it for granted. I have nothing to do with her at all." Lord Daoist Jinghe sneered and stared at Shi with a sharp gaze. "If you have nothing to do with her, why did you hide your identity from her? Why didn't you see her for 2 years? Why did you cultivate so hard? I was the one who brought you up. Other people might not know about your twisted thoughts, but I know them all too well. You didn't tell her who you were because you didn't want to face her as an elder. You didn't want to see her and cultivated with all your might because your self-esteem was hurt by her deification great ancestor. You thought you've always been taking care of her, but in the blink of an eye, you're nothing but an ant in her great ancestor's eyes. You felt like you suddenly lost the qualifications to have any thoughts about her, so you cultivated like crazy. Brat, you always thought Master was unreliable, but I have to tell you, no matter what, I've lived for 800 years, you're still too inexperienced." She didn't say anything during this long speech, but his expression was terrifyingly gloomy. He knew this master of his had always been frivolous, but what he said now made him feel as if the secrets in his heart were suddenly exposed in a defenseless situation and exposed to the sun without any shelter. He also felt as if his softest place was ruthlessly pricked by a needle. It was a dull pain, but he couldn't find the wound. After Lord Taoist Jinghe finished speaking, he took a deep breath and continued to say, "You've always been stubborn. You keep everything in your heart and think you can do everything well. But I have to tell you that this kind of thing is gone once you miss it, so it doesn't matter if you don't admit it now. I'll watch you, but don't say one thing and mean another. Master doesn't want you to regret it later." She didn't speak and just glared at Lord Taoist Jinghe in front of him, but when he heard the latter's words, his gaze subconsciously softened. He looked down and his expression was stiff. No one knew what he was thinking. After a long time, his somewhat hoarse voice was heard. "Don't think you're infallible. My diligent cultivation has nothing to do with this matter." "Nothing to do with it?" Lord Taoist Jinghe came over and smiled. "Brat, do you think I can't see something in your heart? There must be something you didn't tell me about the matter last time. It hurt your self-esteem, didn't it?" She didn't speak, but his expression changed and he clenched his fists. Seeing his expression, Lord Taoist Jinghe stepped back, sighed softly, and said in a soft voice that he had never used before, This matter. It's all my fault for not teaching you well. You've always had a firm Tao heart since you were a child. Aside from cultivating, you didn't think about anything else. At such a young age, you were as steady as an old man. At that time, I thought you were really born to cultivate, but now I realize that's not the case. You don't get entangled in anything because you don't care, but when you do care, it'll be a disaster. Your cultivation journey is too smooth. Don't stare at me. Although you've also experienced many dangerous situations, you've never experienced the tribulation of the state of mind. It's so smooth that you've never tasted the taste of failure. Although you've been taken care of by me since you were a child, you don't like to rely on me. All these years, your cultivation until the core formation realm can be said to be the result of your own efforts, and it actually has nothing to do with me. Because of this, you've always been confident and proud. Your pride makes you always ask yourself to do your best and not be affected by anything or anyone. This kind of temperament has always made you walk ahead of others, but you don't know that excessive pride can cost you your life. She lowered his eyes and didn't speak. This unreliable master of his would never say such a long speech, nor would he use such a caring and soft tone, but his words were so sharp that he couldn't say anything to refute. If you go on like this, you'll have an inner demon," he said with a long sigh. She pursed his lips and said, "I'll solve it." But Lord Taoist Jinghe just shook his head. "I know you don't want to rely on me, but there are some things that I, an old monster who has lived for 800 years, can see more clearly than you. I don't know what's bothering you, but I know that the source of everything is that girl. So, I'm seriously reminding you that if you get her, your inner demon will naturally disappear. She's not an object." Upon hearing Qin's somewhat stubborn tone, Lord Taoist Jinghe smiled. It wasn't the kind of smile one would have when one was old and frivolous. Instead, it carried a bit of tolerance and a bit of pampering. "I talked for so long, but you actually only emphasized this point. Brat, you're really done for." She no longer spoke. He lowered his head and didn't move. Lord Taoist Jinghe took out his handkerchief, wiped his face clean and said slowly, "In fact, this girl is really not bad. She has a rough experience, so she knows self-respect and self-improvement. Although she hasn't grown enough right now, she'll definitely become a useful person in the future after being tempered. Apart from anything else, she's indeed suitable for you. You don't like noise, so she's very quiet. You only love to cultivate, so she also has a firm Tao heart. Most importantly, you admire her very much. It's impossible for you to fall in love with a woman all of a sudden. You can only start with admiration. The more you admire, the more you care, and the more you care, the easier it is to be moved. You've always looked down on women, but you just emphasize that she's not an object. Brat, can you deny that she's very special in your heart?" She still didn't answer, but it made Lord Taoist Jinghe even happier. "I haven't seen you so awkward in many years. Looking at you like this, I really feel a sense of accomplishment." Upon hearing this, she raised his head and shouted angrily, "Master!" Lord Taoist Jinghe was very happy, so he ignored Qin's expression. "Don't. Other people's children have teenage worries when they're in their teens or 20s, but you only have them when you're over 100 years old. How rare." She became even more annoyed. Although he didn't say anything, he clenched his fists as if he wanted to punch him. Of course, he wouldn't do such a disgraceful thing like beating his elder, but he didn't mind driving him out. Seeing that she was about to lose control of his anger, Lord Taoist Jinghe wisely stopped while he was ahead. Alright, let's not talk about that. Let's just seriously discuss the feasibility of dual cultivation. Brat, you've cultivated the pure yang technique you obtained from the deification senior to the third layer, right? Right now, your pure yang aura is getting stronger and stronger, and it's not much different from a pure yang body. Your art of 3 primordial cycles has obtained extreme yang aura and neutral aura, so you only lack extreme yin aura, right? Upon seeing Qin Shi nodding hesitantly, Lord Taoist Jinghe continued to speak. Let's talk about the art of 3 primordial cycles first. This cultivation technique is closely related to the distant past era. Ancient cultivators believed that the 3 primordial auras were the origin of heaven and earth. According to what you said, this cultivation method is most suitable for advancing to the next realm. However, the requirements for cultivating it are very harsh. If the 3 elemental qis cannot be formed, then there is no hope for the great Tao. Right now, you already have the extreme yang and neutral qi, but you can't find the extreme yin qi. I don't believe that you don't know that dual cultivation with a female cultivator with a pure yin body is the easiest and safest way to obtain the extreme yin qi. Qin Shi remained silent, but Lord Taoist Jinghe didn't force him to speak. He continued to say, let's talk about the pure yang art. In the past, when you accidentally obtained the yang spiritual bead, I told you that this kind of rare treasure would allow your yang energy to grow endlessly, and it might even change your physique. Now that he had obtained the pure yang secret art, this saying had come true. Now that you have a pure yang body, you will receive great benefits when you dual cultivate with a pure yin body. After that, the room fell silent. Lord Taoist Jinghe stared at Qin Shi as if waiting for him to make a decision. Qin Shi's expression was stiff, but he didn't say a word. After a long time, Qin Shi finally said, I don't want to dual cultivate for some kind of benefit, whether it's for cultivation or for my inner demon. Lord Taoist Jinghe burst into laughter. He wasn't surprised by Qin Shi's answer at all. He patted Qin Shi's shoulder helplessly. Brat, I just said too much pride will cost you your life. You'd better? So what? If I have to rely on a woman to form my nascent soul, what's the fun in that? Lord Taoist Jinghe shook his head, but he suddenly asked, then let me ask you, if it's not for cultivation or for your inner demon, do you really not want her? This time he didn't get an answer, so he could only borrow a place to tidy himself up and return to Shangqing Palace refreshed. He was a wise man his whole life, so how could he let his disciples and grand-disciples see him with a dirty face? Fortunately, this brat didn't take any disciples and was in closed-door meditation now, so there was no one around his cave. After Lord Taoist Jinghe left for a long time, a low voice came from inside the cave. At least, after I form my nascent soul, Qin Shoujing. Bai Yanfei clenched his teeth and cast a spell with all his might. The towering old tree in front of him broke and crushed a shrub with a crashing sound. He felt a bit more comfortable, so he looked for a place to crouch down and rest. Bai Yanfei had always been very proud. He thought it was natural for him to be a bit proud. He was born in the royal family of the secular world and was the noble crown prince of Yan country. Ever since he was a child, he lived in luxury. When he was 10 years old, a master immortal came to the imperial palace. That master immortal was proficient in the art of immortals and mastered the wonderful art of wind and thunder, letting him know that immortals really existed in this world. He was very envious, so he pestered that master immortal to acknowledge him as his master. The master immortal couldn't dissuade him, so he reluctantly tested Bai Yanfei's spiritual root because he was the crown prince. Unexpectedly, he discovered that Bai Yanfei had the aptitude of a single spiritual root, which was rarely seen in 100 years. The master immortal was overjoyed and reported Bai Yanfei's matter to his own cultivation group. In fact, this master immortal was only a part-time disciple of Shangqing school. His master allowed him to leave the mountain, but he just wanted to return to the secular world and enjoy the glory, splendor, and wealth. Unexpectedly, his master found a genius with a single spiritual root. Because of this, he obtained enormous benefits and was accepted as an inner disciple. He was even bestowed a foundation-building pill. Later, this master immortal senior personally came to Yan country and took him back to Mount Taikang. He also made him acknowledge the head Grand Supreme Elder as a disciple and personally taught him. At that time he no longer cared about the glory, splendor, and wealth of the secular world. He abandoned the crown prince position and the envious gazes of his former imperial father and brothers to become the advanced inner disciple of Shangqing School's head Grand Supreme Elder. When he was a mortal, he was the crown prince of a country. When he was a cultivator, he was the proud disciple of a late-stage nascent soul cultivator. How could he not be proud when he achieved what he did? Sure enough, with his excellent aptitude, his path of cultivation was also very smooth. Advancing to the next realm and building his foundation were extremely difficult and dangerous for others, but they were extremely easy for him. However, there were still times when he wasn't happy. For example, whenever the female cultivators in the school talked about the male disciples, they would first say, Martial Uncle Shoujing, or Senior Martial Brother Shoujing first. He was very unconvinced. What was so great about Qin Shoujing? Building his foundation at 20 and forming his gold core at 78? Lord Daoist Jinghe's direct disciple? Handsome? Speaking of appearance, he had seen Senior Martial Brother Shoujing's appearance, and he was just SOSO. He thought he was handsome and charming, not losing to anyone else at all. Speaking of identity, he was Lord Daoist Jinyang's last disciple. Was Qin Shoujing worse than him? Lord Daoist Jinyang was also a late-stage nascent soul great cultivator. His cultivation level and identity were even higher than Lord Daoist Jinghe's. Speaking of cultivation level, wasn't it because Qin Shoujing was older than him? Speaking of aptitude, Qin Shoujing was nothing but a person with double spiritual roots, far inferior to him. In conclusion, Qin Shoujing was only born more than 100 years earlier than him. If he had more than 100 years, Qin Shoujing wouldn't even be qualified to carry his shoes for him. Of course, he was just casually thinking about these things before. Mentioning Qin Shoujing just made him unhappy. But now he was gnashing his teeth, wishing he could blast Qin Shoujing away with a spell just like that tree. In fact, it wasn't that he couldn't be with that senior martial sister Mo. He just felt that a young, promising, talented and handsome young hero like him couldn't have a beauty as his companion. Senior martial sister Mo's identity was good, her cultivation level was also good, her appearance was also considered good, and she was about the same age as him. Most importantly, she had a gentle temperament. She wasn't as boring as senior martial sister Wu of Blue Phoenix Peak or as unruly as junior martial sister Jiang of Drifting Cloud Peak. She was also capable of handling affairs, so she definitely wouldn't have a problem taking care of her husband and raising their children. But he never expected that when he finally found someone pleasing to his eyes, that guy, Qin Shoujing, would unexpectedly poke his nose in. What was Qin Shoujing? A guy who couldn't compare to him in anything. It was precisely because he was more than 100 years older than him that his cultivation level was higher than his. No, he couldn't be outdone by Qin Shoujing. It was fine if it was other people, but how could he let Qin Shoujing snatch senior martial sister Mo away from him? That would be too humiliating. Since he already harbored malicious intentions towards senior martial sister Mo, he must win her heart and let that guy, Qin Shoujing, know that he, Bai Yanfei, was the #1 young hero in Shenqing school. With that thought in mind, Bai Yanfei squatted on a tree stump and started laughing mischievously. Chapter 144. As a result, Mo Gu realized she didn't know what her master did with the matter she entrusted to Lord Daoist Jinghe. Not only did junior martial brother Bai not behave, but he even became more aggressive. When she cultivated every day, she would definitely receive a summoning talisman. The content was something along the lines of, Senior martial sister, today's weather is good. Let's go out and meet up. As soon as she went out, junior martial brother Bai would immediately appear in front of her. In the end, even Yi Jinji was affected. He said a martial uncle Bai fawned on him so much that he ran away in fear. Mo Chenga was furious. She rushed to Lord Daoist Jinghe's main hall and shouted, Master! Lord Daoist Jinghe was so frightened by her sudden appearance that he threw away 2 grapes. When he regained his senses, he glared at her. What are you doing? Why are you making such a big fuss? Mo Chenga already knew what kind of person her master was, so she wasn't scared at all. Not only did she not shake him off, but she also complained, How did you do things? Junior martial brother Bai is pestering me even more tightly now. He's so annoying. Lord Daoist Jinghe was surprised. What about him? He sends me summoning talismans every day and even runs to Jinji's side to fawn on me. He really scared Jinji. Oh. Lord Daoist Jinghe swallowed a grape and nodded thoughtfully. This brat isn't stupid after all. He actually knows how to fawn on the people around you. Master. Mo Chenga became even more annoyed at his reaction. Whose side are you speaking for? Lord Daoist Jinghe hastily corrected himself. I said he's too stupid. He actually harassed the people around you. Now that you're angry, what else is there to talk about? That's not the point, okay? Mo Chenga held her forehead. Who's the master and who's the disciple? Why do I always get half killed by this master's nonsense? Then what's the point? Lord Daoist Jinghe was baffled. The point is, how did you do things? Speaking of this, Lord Daoist Jinghe said, "Girl, Master fought with old man Xinjiang for you. Not only are you not moved at all but you also talk to Master like this?" Fought. Emo Chenga was baffled. "Master, why did you fight with martial uncle Xinjiang? Because that old Taoist looks down on you?" Lord Daoist Jinghe said boldly, "You're my disciple. Looking down on you means looking down on me. If I don't hit him, who else should I hit?" Emo Chenga felt she didn't need to say anything. She should have known that if things were handed over to this master, it would definitely turn into a fight in the end. Now that the fight was over, it was no wonder that the other party did not listen to him at all. "Why are you looking at me like that?" Lord Daoist Jinghe, who was baptized by Emo Chenga's murderous gaze, was unhappy. "Child, why don't you know how to respect your master?" Emo Chenga ignored his words. She stroked her chest and swallowed her anger. She then said calmly, "All right, master, you can continue eating grapes and putting on airs. I'll deal with it myself." She turned around and walked out of the main hall. Behind her, Lord Daoist Jinghe's noisy voice rang out. "Child, how can you talk to your master like that? What do you mean by putting on airs? Don't go." Emo Chenga walked out of Shangqing Palace and sent a summoning talisman. The reason why she didn't want to settle it herself was because she wanted to keep a low profile and didn't want to stir up trouble. But now, it seemed that she couldn't count on anyone else. It was better for her to do it herself. Besides, so what if she offended that junior martial brother by? At most, she would offend that martial uncle Xinjiang. In any case, her master already had a falling out with him. She didn't have to wait long outside Shangqing Palace before she heard a cheerful voice. "Senior martial sister Emo." Emo Chenga took a look. This junior martial brother Bai came really fast. Junior martial brother Bai. She forced a smile. Bai Yanfei's eyes were full of spring and his face was full of smiles. After he decided to pursue this senior martial sister Emo, he consulted several senior martial brothers with dual cultivation partners and several senior martial sisters, but they all said different things and no one could convince the other. In the end, there was only one thing that no one objected to. A chaste woman was afraid of a pestering man. Bai Yanfei thought about it. He really didn't know how to use other methods, but this one was simple. He just needed to pester her directly. Therefore, he sent a summoning talisman every day and inquired about her whereabouts. In the end, someone suggested he start with senior martial sister Mo's little nephew. He thought senior martial sister Mo only had this one blood relative, so she must value him very much. Sure enough, senior martial sister Mo replied to his summoning talisman and was willing to meet him. Senior martial sister Mo, Bai Yanfei beamed with joy. "I've been waiting for a long time. You're finally free." Emo Chenga looked left and right, then said with a calm expression, "Junior martial brother Bai, I have something to tell you. Come with me." Bai Yanfei nodded hurriedly. There were many people in the vicinity. It would be bad if others heard them. It would indeed be bad if others heard them. Although Emo Chenga was already prepared to offend people, she didn't intend to make them lose face. That would be making enemies for no reason. After circling around in the sky, Missouri Chenga finally saw a completely empty mountaintop, so she took the lead and landed. "Senior martial sister Emo, this is..." Bai Yanfei originally thought they were going to find a beautiful place to talk about their worries, but he never expected they'd find a bare mountaintop without even a place to sit. However, his eyes shifted. There was no one here. Could it be that she wanted to? Before he could finish his thought, he heard Emo Chenga's voice. "Junior martial brother Bai, I think we should talk about some things." Bai Yanfei regained his composure. He rubbed his nose and obediently answered, "Senior martial sister, please speak." Emo Chenga glanced at him, then looked into the distance. Her voice was indifferent as she said, "I understand junior martial brother's kindness, but ever since I embarked on the path of immortality, I've been wholeheartedly focused on Tao and didn't intend to get involved in matters of love, so I can only let you down. With junior martial brother's talent, presumably your future is bright. When you succeed in your Tao, you'll naturally find a beautiful woman to marry you. Why do you need to settle for an ordinary woman like me? Junior martial brother, please don't disturb me in the future. I'm not as talented as junior martial brother. If my Tao heart isn't firm, I'm afraid I won't be able to accomplish anything." After she finished speaking, Emo Chenga glanced at him again. However, when she saw Bai Yanfei's bewildered expression, she couldn't help but frown. "Junior martial brother Bai?" Bai Yanfei was startled. "Junior martial brother, did you hear what I said just now?" Bai Yanfei scratched his head as if he still didn't understand. "I've finished speaking. I'll take my leave first." Just as she was about to turn around and slip away, Bai Yanfei suddenly shouted from behind her, "Senior Marshal Sister Mo." Mo Chenga felt helpless. She stopped and turned around. "Junior Marshal Brother Bai, do you have anything else to say?" Bai Yanfei was dumbfounded for a moment before he said, "Senior Marshal Sister, are you rejecting me?" Mo Chenga naturally wouldn't say it so bluntly. She smiled and said, "It's me who's not worthy of Junior Marshal Brother Bai. But I don't mind." Bai Yanfei shouted, "I know Senior Marshal Sister Mo isn't a peerless beauty and your aptitude is also average, but I think you're quite suitable, so I won't be picky." Could it be that he couldn't tell she was just being polite? But I mind. After rejecting a person she didn't like, Mo Chenga also became angry when the person said in a condescending tone, "I don't mind that you're not worthy of me." Her voice turned cold. "I mind very much." Bai Yanfei still didn't understand why she was angry. With an innocent expression he said, "I don't mind, why do you still mind?" Mo Chenga tried to restrain herself, but in the end she still couldn't hold back. "Junior Marshal Brother Bai, even if your cultivation level is the highest in the world and you're incomparably handsome, there will still be people who don't like you. I don't want everyone to like me, that's why I'm the one who doesn't like you," Mo Chenga interrupted him and said bluntly. Some people didn't understand even if she gave him face, so she might as well tell the truth. Ha! Such a straightforward answer made Bai Yanfei finally silent. Mo Chenga saw his face turning green and white, so she thought it was better to be tactful and not turn hostile. "Junior Marshal Brother Bai, I'm wholeheartedly devoted to Dao, so I really don't want to get involved in this kind of love matter. You're very good, there's naturally a good girl who likes you, but I don't have such thoughts, so let's end this matter here." Just as she was about to turn around and leave, another voice came from behind her. "Senior Marshal Sister Mo." Mo Chenga felt powerless. "Junior Marshal Brother, is there anything else?" The corners of Bai Yanfei's mouth twitched, but in the end he still said, "Is it because of Qin Shoujing? You rejected me because of Qin Shoujing, right?" Mo Chenga said expressionlessly, "Who said that?" "Marshal Uncle Jinghe said that Qin Shoujing brought you back because he wanted to use you." Mo Chenga didn't say anything, but her expression had already explained her mood. "You misunderstood, right?" "I didn't misunderstand. This was what Marshal Uncle Jinghe said." Bai Yanfei sneered. "What's so good about Qin Shoujing? Which part of me is inferior to him? In terms of aptitude and identity, how can he compare to me? He was only born 100 years earlier than me. Give me another 100 years and I'll definitely trample him under my feet." Mo Chenga also sneered. "Junior Marshal Brother Bai, do you know where you're standing right now? Whatever you do in Morning Sun Peak is fine, but this is Clear Spring Peak. It's not a place for you to throw a tantrum like a young master." Bai Yanfei was startled by such rude words. Senior Marshal Sister Mo Chenga continued to sneer. "On Clear Spring Peak in front of me, you spoke ill of my Senior Marshal Brother. Junior Marshal Brother Bai, could it be that Marshal Uncle Xinjiang never taught you manners?" Bai Yanfei's face turned blue. Mo Chenga took a step forward. "I said some polite words to you, but you don't understand, so I can only tell you the truth. Junior Marshal Brother Bai, do you think you're amazing? If it weren't for Marshal Uncle Xinjiang, what would you be? Single spiritual root? That's right, your aptitude is very good, but if we just look at aptitude, what's the point of us cultivating? We'll just rank you according to your aptitude. Yes, Senior Marshal Brother Shoujing is more than 100 years older than you, but even if you're given 100 years, can you do the same as him? I'll say it bluntly again, are you sure you can form your gold core by yourself in 100 years? Of course I can." Bai Yanfei's face turned red. It was unclear whether he was angry or embarrassed. "I have a single spiritual root. Even if I don't have a master, I can still do it. You're actually comparing me with Qin Shoujing? It's you who wants to compare yourself with Senior Marshal Brother Shoujing." Mo Chenga raised the corners of her mouth and stared at him. "It's fine if you don't want to compare yourself with him, but why don't you compare yourself with me? I'm not a genius with a single spiritual root, but I'm already 29 years old and in the middle stage of the foundation building realm. What about you? Genius Junior Marshal Brother Bai, you're only a few years younger than me. Why did you just build your foundation?" "That's because you had a fated chance." Bai Yanfei shouted, trembling with anger. "Do you think I don't know? You encountered a fated chance right after you built your foundation, so you directly advanced to the middle stage of the foundation building realm." "Yes, but fated chances are also strength." Mo Chenga continued to smile. So what if we're comparing the aura refining realm to the foundation building realm? Junior Martial Brother Bai, you built your foundation at 22 years old, Senior Martial Brother Shoujing built his foundation at 20, and Senior Martial Brother Lingxi of Sweet Du Peak built his foundation at 17, you still couldn't beat them. Let's talk about me. I built my foundation at 23 years old. At that time, I was still a waste with 5 spiritual roots and I was only 1 year slower than you. Did you really beat all of us? Bai Yanfei couldn't say anything. He only saw Mo Tiange looking at him as if she was looking at an ignorant child. Cultivate diligently. If you only put your mind on dual cultivation, 100 years later, you'll really be unworthy of the title, genius with a single spiritual root. Senior Martial Sister Mo. Bai Yanfei once again chased after her. It was unclear whether it was because he was unwilling or because he was angry. But this time, Mo Tiange didn't stop. With a wave of her sleeve, a surge of spiritual aura blocked his path, so Bai Yanfei could only watch helplessly as she stepped onto the white silk handkerchief and swaggered away. Bai Yanfei stood in the same spot. His heart was filled with resentment and embarrassment. It really never crossed his mind that this Senior Martial Sister Mo would actually look down on him. But just now, Senior Martial Sister Mo easily blocked his path with a single move, letting him know that he really wasn't as good as her. No, of course it wasn't like that. He angrily cast a spell, blasting a big hole in the ground. He was a genius with a single spiritual root, and he was Lord Taoist Jinyang's last disciple. How could he be inferior to others? They were just lucky. The bare cliff suddenly slid open, startling Bai Yanfei back to his senses. As soon as he turned his head, he saw a person standing in front of the open stone door. That person was looking at him with an indifferent gaze. Junior Martial Brother Bai, you came to our Clear Spring Peak as a guest. Why did you smash a hole in my immortal's cave? Bai Yanfei stared blankly at the person in front of him, unable to regain his composure for a while. But soon when he clearly saw who it was, he jumped up in anger. Qin Shoujing, it's all because of you. I'll fight you. Bai Yanfei unreasonably took out the magic weapon his master bestowed upon him and angrily rushed forward. It never occurred to him that he wouldn't be able to defeat Qin Shoujing with his current cultivation level. Qin Shi simply raised his hand, and a spiritual pressure immediately enveloped him. Bai Yanfei's spiritual aura stagnated, and he couldn't move even an inch. He was unwilling to accept this and desperately tried to mobilize his spiritual aura to resist, but this spiritual pressure was too strong. He spat out a mouthful of blood and fell to the ground. Qin Shi withdrew his spiritual aura and said faintly, Junior Martial Brother Bai, don't blame me for teaching you a lesson on behalf of Martial Uncle Jinyang. You. Bai Yanfei lay on the ground, unable to say anything. It was unclear whether it was because he was beaten or because he was angry. After thinking about it, he was overwhelmed with sorrow, so he simply burst into tears. Why was his life so bitter? He had just been rejected, and now he was being taught a lesson by his rival in love. Moreover, it was in this kind of position he really lost all his face. Qin Shi was dumbfounded when he started crying. Although he usually didn't show his emotions, he still couldn't help but feel like he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He had only met this Junior Martial Brother Bai many years ago. Although he had grown up now, his temperament was still that of a child. After crying for a long time, Bai Yanfei wiped his face and stood up while sobbing. His face was covered in tears and snot. Coupled with the blood he spat out just now, his whole face was smeared with blood. In an instant, he no longer had the demeanor of a handsome young master and looked like a dirty cat. Just as he was about to stand up, pat his clothes, tidy his hair, and go back in a fresh and clean manner, he saw Qin Shi right after he stood up. He became angry again. Why are you still here? Qin Shi said expressionlessly, this is my immortal's cave. Of course I'm here. You. Bai Yanfei suddenly felt so ashamed and resentful that he wanted to die when he thought about how he was treated as a joke. He fiercely glared at Qin Shi. However, Qin Shi turned a blind eye to his glare. He said calmly and indifferently, Junior Martial Brother Bai, if there's nothing else, you should hurry back to Morning Sun Peak. I won't keep you here. Who wants to stay? But Qin Shi didn't wait for him to speak. He turned around and entered his immortal's cave. The stone door was closed and the illusory formation was opened. Bai Yanfei was left standing alone in a daze. The wind blew through his dirty cat face, making him look extremely sad. Mo Tiange angrily opened the restriction on Mingxin residents. Yi Jinji and his little friend Hualing were playing with the inferno beast, Xiaohua, in the courtyard. When the two little guys saw her coming in with a cold expression, They immediately stood up. Auntie. Martial uncle. Seeing their scared expressions, Mo Chenga hastily squeezed out a smile. What's Hualing? What are you two playing? No, nothing. Yijinji hurriedly said, Auntie, we're not playing with Xiaohua. We're playing with Xiaohua. This time, Mo Chenga really burst out laughing. Xiaohua was currently a spiritual beast equivalent to the early stage of the foundation building realm. It was also docile, so it became the target of these two little guys. They always wanted Xiaohua to help them with this and that, thinking she didn't know. In fact, how could she not know? It was just that they restrained themselves, so she just let them be. Besides, with Xiaohua by their side, she wasn't afraid of any accidents happening to them. Alright, you two can play. Mo Chenga stroked Yijinji's head and let the two little guys play by themselves. She then went into the cultivation room. Inside the virtual sky world there was still a cool breeze and clear water. Mo Chenga sat in the small room for a while, trying to calm her chaotic mood. She picked up a stack of books, but after staring at them in a daze for a while, she suddenly threw all the books out. These books made of different materials fell on the bamboo planks, making a messy sound. She panted heavily, sat down dejectedly, and buried her face in the crook of her arms. Martial Uncle Jinghe said Qin Shoujing brought you back because he wanted to use you. Martial Uncle Jinghe said Qin Shoujing brought you back because he wanted to use you. Bai Yanfei's words kept coming back and forth in her mind, refusing to stop. Although she was so sure and played it down at that time, she couldn't control the anger in her heart. In fact, she knew those words must have been said by Lord Daoist Jinghe. No matter what, Bai Yanfei wouldn't make things up. However, she didn't know what the original words were or what they meant. She couldn't help but guess, did they really have such a plan? With the virtual sky world, she wasn't afraid of other people harboring evil intentions towards her, but she didn't want that person to really harbor evil intentions. Chapter 145. Mo Chenga later heard that out of anger, Lord Daoist Jinyang took junior martial brother by back and grounded him. He then disappeared without a trace. Even when she went to Morning Sun Peak to run errands, she never saw junior martial brother Bai again. Her days also returned to normal. When she gradually integrated into the school and gained a reputation among the aura refining disciples, Lord Daoist Jinghe agreed that she no longer needed to go to Mingxua Hall every day. She only needed to go to the steward's hall to give sermons every once in a while. In addition, the affairs of Shangqing Palace were still handed over to the maids, but she was still responsible for them. If there were any mistakes, they could ask her. Just like that, Mo Chenga unconsciously realized that her status in Shenqing school had risen. Not to mention the low-level disciples calling her grandmaster, even the foundation-building disciples calling her martial uncle was more sincere. As a result, she swallowed back the words she heard from Bai Yanfei some time ago. No matter what kind of thoughts they had towards her in the beginning, she saw how well Lord Daoist Jing had treated her now. If he really treated her as a human furnace that could be used, why did he put in so much effort? If they didn't mention it, she would just pretend she never heard it. 1 year after another, time flew by. Although she had the virtual sky world, Mo Chenga's cultivation level didn't rise too fast. First, she deliberately slowed down the pace of her cultivation to lay a good foundation so that her unstable mental state wouldn't affect her core formation in the future. Second, although there were many spiritual plants in the virtual sky world, they were all high-level spiritual plants. She was only in the foundation building realm now, so she couldn't use many of them. 3 years had passed. Mo Chenga was now 32 years old, but she still maintained the appearance of an 18 or 19-year-old. There were many reasons for this. First, her art of Sunu, now called Sunu Art of the Origin, had the effect of retaining her youth. Second, she took a look-preserving pill, so unless she encountered some special circumstances, she wouldn't age in this life. Even without these two reasons, she was now a foundation-building cultivator. With the lifespan of 300 to 400 years, she was still young. Yijinji, on the other hand, had grown up. He was now a 15-year-old teenager, but his figure grew taller. His face gradually grew longer and even his voice became coarse. Mo Chenga wasn't tall, but he had already caught up to her. Presumably, it wouldn't be long before she looked up at him. Nevertheless, Yijinji's attitude toward her had never changed. He still trusted and admired her and regarded her as a respected elder. As for that master in name, he simply couldn't remember him. Yijinji's cultivation level rose very quickly. Mo Chenga generously used all the medicinal pills and treasures she could use in the aura refining realm on him. Right now, his cultivation level was already in the 7th layer of the aura refining realm, completely catching up to Hualing. Under Mo Chenga's influence, this child also cultivated very hard. His temperament and perception were both excellent. In time he would definitely have some achievements. The people of the Yi clan had been keeping in touch with him and would send things over every once in a while. They didn't know about Mo Chenga's existence. They only knew that Yi Jinji was accepted as a disciple by a core formation cultivator. They were very happy, so they also sent a lot of offerings. These things were nominally given to Master Taoist Shoujing, but in fact they were all delivered to Mo Chenga. Seeing those offerings, which were priceless in the secular world, Mo Chenga knew Yi clan members were living very well in the secular world, so she felt relieved. Although she didn't have any feelings for Yi clan, it was, after all, her clan and second uncle entrusted it to her. If it was within her ability, she ought to do her part. When the 3rd year passed, another great piece of good news came from Shenqing School. Master Taoist Shenin successfully advanced into the nascent soul realm. He was now Lord Taoist Shenin. After learning about this, Mo Chenga conveyed her congratulations to Lord Taoist Shenin and changed the way she addressed him. From now on she had to call him Martial Uncle Shenin. Luo Fengshui and the others were also her peers. Once they advanced into the nascent soul realm, they would be a great master. Although they still had the master-disciple relationship, it could be considered they had established their own school. Shenqing School had a total of 6 peaks. Each of the 5 nascent soul cultivators occupied 1 peak. Now that the 6th nascent soul cultivator had appeared, the empty peak was assigned to Lord Taoist Shenin. From then on, Lord Taoist Shenin and his disciples all moved to Sweet Dew Peak. For the sake of Lord Taoist Xuanin's advancement, Lord Taoist Jinghe specially looked for Mo Chenga to educate her. Lord Taoist Xuanin's aptitude was excellent. He was one of the disciples with a single spiritual root that Shenqing School would only accept once every several hundred years. However, he never fought for the title of genius. He only cultivated step by step, laying a solid foundation step by step. Now, he was already more than 400 years old when he tried to form his nascent soul so he could succeed on his first try. This matter was just right to educate Mo Chenga. She obtained the art of the origin, got rid of the reputation of having a waste spiritual root, and her aptitude could also be called a genius. Lord Taoist Jinghe knew her cultivation was too fast, so he specially reminded her that no matter how good her aptitude was, she could only achieve twice the result with half the effort if she had a solid foundation. Mo Chenga understood his meaning. She was also aware of this problem. Building her foundation at the age of 23 was considered early, but she also directly advanced from the early stage to the middle stage. If she sold some of the spiritual plants in her virtual sky world, she could have continued taking spirit-gathering pills and reached the late stage of the foundation-building realm in 10 to 20 years. However, using medicinal pills to advance her cultivation level had a huge hidden danger. If her mental state couldn't keep up with her cultivation level, problems would arise when she made a realm breakthrough. Lord Taoist Jinghe was very pleased that she understood his meaning, but he muttered, "It'd be good if that stinky brat could also understand." Lord Taoist Xuanin's advancement into the nascent soul realm not only greatly affected Shenqing School, but it also affected the structure of the great cultivation groups in the celestial pole. The demonic beast riot not long ago was now officially over. Because Shenqing School issued a mountain sealing order early, although they lost many foundation-building disciples and several core formation cultivators, the aura-refining disciples weren't affected. Many disciples with high aptitudes were also well protected. Presumably, in 50 to 60 years, Shenqing School would return to its former heyday. As for the other 6 great cultivation groups, Danding School no longer had the strength to be one of the 7 great cultivation groups. It would take at least several hundred years for them to recover their strength. Although powerful cultivation groups like Tiandao sect also managed to preserve their most important disciples, their losses were much greater than Shenqing School's because of their early underestimation. The other sect that didn't suffer much was Zhengfa School, which was located in the northernmost glacial zone. It had now been renamed Zhengfa sect. They only had one branch in Kunwu, so although they suffered losses, it didn't affect them too much. However, the conditions in the northernmost glacial zone were harsh. Although Zhengfa sect dominated the north, it couldn't develop to the scale of Tiandao sect or Shenqing School. Otherwise, they wouldn't have established a branch in Kunwu. The reason why Shenqing School always ranked below Tiandao sect was because its nascent soul cultivators were inferior to Tiandao sect. Tiandao sect had 7 nascent soul cultivators while Shenqing School only had 5. In terms of other disciples, the difference between the two groups wasn't big. Now, Lord Taoist Shenin advanced into the nascent soul realm, increasing the number of nascent soul cultivators in Shenqing School to 6. Although Lord Taoist Lingxi was likely to pass away within 100 years, Master Taoist Shoujing had successfully advanced into the late stage of the core formation realm. With his temperament, it wouldn't be a problem for him to add another nascent soul cultivator to Xianqing school within 100 years. There was also Master Taoist Lingxi, a genius with a single spiritual root. He was now in the middle stage of the core formation realm and might advance in 100 years. At that time, the number of nascent soul cultivators in Xianqing school would increase to 7. Moreover, almost all of them would be in the prime of their lives. In addition, Lord Taoist Jinyang had just turned 1,000 years old. With his cultivation level in the late stage of the nascent soul realm, it was very possible for him to live for another 700 or 800 years. Lord Taoist Jinghe was more than 800 years old and was now in the peak of the middle stage. As long as he had a fated chance, he could advance to the late stage. Knowledgeable people could almost imagine how prosperous Xianqing school would be in the next several hundred years. On the other hand, although Tiandao sect had 7 nascent soul cultivators, 3 of them were nearing the end of their lives and would pass away within the next 200 or 300 years. Among the core formation cultivators, they couldn't compare to Xianqing school in terms of talent. Therefore, when Lord Taoist Xianyin advanced into the nascent soul realm, Xianqing school sent invitations to many cultivation groups that were on good terms with them. The cultivation groups that received the invitations all pondered what kind of gifts they should send to befriend Xianqing school. Among them, the Grand Supreme Elders of Tiandao sect had mixed feelings. This indicated that the title of the number 1 cultivation group in the celestial pole would very likely change hands. Regardless of what other people thought, the nascent soul ceremony Xianqing school prepared for Lord Taoist Xianyin was bustling with noise and excitement. Mo Chenga had a headache. Many guests came to Xianqing school for this nascent soul ceremony. Ordinary guests could be received by aura-refining disciples, but those guests with status and background had to be received by elite disciples like them. Because of this, Mo Chenga secretly cursed that senior martial brother Shoujing, who claimed to be in closed-door meditation. Why did he say that it didn't matter to him, but she had to put aside her cultivation and be busy everywhere? But in any case, this was Lord Taoist Jinghe's idea, so she had to obediently obey. Although she didn't show much respect to this master on the surface, there was a trace of respect in her heart. The reason she could have her current status and didn't make any mistakes on the path of cultivation was all thanks to this master. Fellow Taoists, welcome to Mount Taikang. I'm Mo Chenga, Lord Taoist Jinghe's disciple. I've been ordered to come and welcome you. This time, cultivators from medium-sized cultivation groups came to the mountain. Their cultivation levels weren't high nor low. Core formation cultivators were already received by their senior martial brothers and sisters with similar cultivation levels, so she received the disciples brought by these people. After all, with her identity, it wouldn't be considered rude even if she came alone. Sure enough, when these 7 or 8 foundation building cultivators heard her identity, they all looked surprised but soon returned the greeting with envy in their eyes. One of them was very quick-witted and immediately said, I'm Wei Shirda, a disciple of Mount Bailing. Greetings to Martial Uncle Mo. Mo Chenga hurriedly smiled and said, Senior Martial Brother, you don't have to be so polite. Our cultivation levels are similar, so you can just call me Senior Martial Brother and Junior Martial Sister. How can I do that? The man smiled flatteringly. Martial Uncle is Lord Taoist Jinghe's disciple. This is too disrespectful to Lord Taoist Jinghe. Senior Martial Brother, you're too polite. Mo Chenga smiled, not showing the slightest bit of complacency. Xianqing school disciples call each other Martial Uncle because we're afraid it'll mess up the seniority. Senior Martial Brother isn't a Xianqing school disciple, so you don't have to do this. My cultivation levels are similar to yours, so we can just treat each other as peers. I see. The man was about to say something when a cold humph came from the crowd. Soon after, someone said in a strange tone, Senior Martial Brother Wei, why are you in such a hurry to make friends with them? Why don't you take a look at your own identity? You'll make people laugh their heads off if this gets out. Wei Shirda's expression immediately changed when he heard this. He turned around and glared at one of the young men. Dong Dafeng, I won't lower myself to the same level as someone who doesn't understand manners like you. That young man sneered and said, Do you not lower yourself to the same level as me, or are you afraid of being laughed at by this junior martial sister from Xianqing school? You, seeing that the two of them were about to fight, Mo Chenga hastily said, Senior Martial Brothers. No matter what, she was still the host, so the moment the two of them heard her calling out, they immediately stopped talking and turned around. Mo Chenga smiled and said, Senior Martial Brothers came to Xianqing school to congratulate us, So why don't you give Martial Uncle Xianin some face and let this matter end here? What do you think? Since she mentioned Lord Daoist Xianin, the two of them had no choice but to stop bickering. They both cupped their hands towards her and said, Junior Martial's sister is right. Wei Shirta probably saw that the young man called her Junior Martial's sister so smoothly, so he also changed the way he addressed her, not wanting the young man to take advantage of him. Mo Chenga heaved a sigh of relief and said, Everyone just arrived at Mount Taikong, so you must be tired. How about I arrange for everyone to rest? These people naturally didn't have any objections. Soon after, the aura refining disciples led the way while she followed behind them and helped these cultivators settle in the guest residences. Just as she finished arranging everything and was about to leave, a cultivator followed her out of the small courtyard. Mo Chenga walked for a while before she suddenly stopped and shouted, Who's there? With the shuttle of flying Apsara and the white silk handkerchief in her hands, she sensed something was wrong and was ready to fight. Unexpectedly, she was stunned when she turned around. The cultivator behind her was also in the early stage of the foundation building realm. He was dressed in black clothes and had a very tall stature. He was more than a head taller than her. Junior Martial Brother Yi? That person said hesitantly, Are you Junior Martial Brother Yi? In just a moment, Mo Chenga regained her composure and smiled. Senior Martial Brother Lu, long time no see. This person was Lu Yidao, one of the few acquaintances she had left in Yunwu sect. Upon hearing her answer, Lu Yidao revealed a smile but stopped halfway. The corners of his eyes were half moist. Junior Martial Brother Yi, you're alive. You're really alive. This is great. His excitement was beyond Mo Chenga's expectations. Ever since she left Yunwu sect, she hadn't thought about the past for a long time. At that time, it could be said that she was fleeing for her life. She simply didn't dare to bid farewell to those people. Moreover, the people she cared about at that time either had families and clans like Murong Yen or had foreseeable futures like Lu Yidao, so she didn't need to worry about anything. Now that she saw Lu Yidao had become a foundation-building cultivator and came to congratulate her on behalf of the sect, he must have been doing well. Mo Chenga was very happy, but she also felt calm because it was within her expectations. After a while, Lu Yidao regained his composure. Junior Martial Brother Yi, please don't take offense. I ran into an old friend today and forgot myself. Senior Martial Brother Lu is happy for me. How could I take offense? Mo Chenga was happy to see Lu Yidao's expression, but she also felt strange. Senior Martial Brother Lu, how did you see me? Lu Yidao smiled and said, I was arranged to live there. He pointed at the guest house not far from them. When I saw you just now, I thought my eyes must have been playing tricks on me. How could there be two people who look so similar but their clothes are completely different? They're too similar, so I couldn't help but come here to verify it. Fortunately, I came and asked. It really was you. Chapter 146. Mo Chenga was both surprised and happy to meet an old friend. Although she fled Mount Yunwu in a sorry state, she was now the advanced inner disciple of a nascent soul cultivator in Shenqing School, the second largest cultivation group in the Celestial Pole. She didn't need to be afraid of Mount Yunwu's Jiang clan finding out, so she calmly admitted her identity. Sooner or later she would personally deal with the Jiang clan. Now, through Lu Yidao's mouth, she let the Jiang clan know she was still alive and well, so it wouldn't be bad to annoy them. The two of them hadn't seen each other for 12 years. After catching up for a while, Mo Chenga invited Lu Yidao back to her residence. Lu Yidao was surprised to see her living in Lord Daoist Jinghe's Immortal's cave and hearing the gatekeeper call her Martial Uncle. He couldn't help but ask, Junior Martial Brother Yi, why do they call you Martial Uncle? Mo Chenga smiled, but before she could answer, a maid answered, Martial Uncle Mo is Grandmaster Jinghe's advanced inner disciple, so we naturally have to call you Martial Uncle. As Mo Chenga's status improved and she gained a firm foothold in Shenqing School, the maids also became obedient. Not only did they not dare to make things difficult for her, but they also tried to please her. Lu Yidao was shocked to hear that. When he met this Junior Martial Brother Yi at Shenqing School, he originally thought she was just lucky enough to join Shenqing School and successfully build her foundation. He didn't expect her to have such an identity. Mo Chenga waved her hand to dismiss Qingqi, who came to deliver tea, then invited Lu Yidao to sit down. Senior Martial Brother Lu, please sit. The two of them sat in the small hall. After drinking tea for a while, Lu Yidao couldn't help but ask, Junior Martial Brother Yi, what happened to you all these years? Not only did you advance to the middle stage of the foundation building realm, but you were also accepted as a disciple by a nascent soul senior? Chenga smiled. I was just lucky. She paused for a moment and said, in the past, everyone thought I only had 5 spiritual roots and happened to have the same strength. It was only after I came to Shenqing school that I realized it was a special kind of spiritual roots. Later, I was accepted as a registered disciple by Lord Taoist Jinghe and became an official disciple after I built my foundation. She only talked about her experiences in a few sentences, but Lui Dao actually sighed and said, back then you suddenly disappeared. Later on, Branch Master Jiang said you were a traitor who killed Jiang Qingxian. I was shocked. After that, I never heard any news about you, so I thought, you actually came to Shenqing school. As he spoke, he asked again, by the way, Junior Martial Brother Qin and Junior Martial Brother Jiang both disappeared with you. Later on, the sect kept this a secret and I couldn't find out any news. I've always guessed that they were related to this matter. Junior Martial Brother Yi, is it true? Chenga hesitated for a moment before she nodded. Correct. Back then, I escaped from Mount Yunwu because Jiang Qingxian behaved inappropriately towards me. Senior Martial Brother Jiang saved me, so he was implicated. Junior Martial Brother Jiang saved you? Lui Dao was shocked once again. It was no wonder he reacted like this. At that time, Jiang Shanghong didn't even spare them a glance, yet he actually offended his own clan for the sake of saving her. It was truly inconceivable. In addition, the fact that she actually left Mount Yunwu in such a manner also made him endlessly shocked. Upon seeing Chenga nod, he took a moment to digest this truth, then asked, what about Junior Martial Brother Qin? Chenga was silent. After a long time she finally said, Senior Martial Brother Lu, just take it that there's no such person in this world. Lui Dao was startled. What do you mean? There's no such person in this world. The corners of Chenga's lips curled into a smile. She didn't want to explain too much. Right, why doesn't Senior Martial Brother Lu seem too surprised about my authenticity? Seeing that she changed the topic so quickly, Lui Dao naturally understood she didn't want to talk about it. He was a cultivator who came from the secular world, so he naturally had the ability to read people's thoughts and body language. Thus, he didn't bring it up again and answered with a smile, Junior Martial Brother Yi indeed didn't have any flaws at that time, and other people also never suspected that you were a woman disguised as a man. However, people like us who've been with you day and night would still more or less notice some abnormalities. At that time, Junior Martial Brother Su. When Su Jingji was mentioned, Lui Dao's expression dimmed for a moment, but he immediately smiled again. Junior Martial Brother Su once secretly told me why he always felt Junior Martial Brother Yi was a bit strange. Chenga never expected the two of them would actually talk about this kind of thing in private. Even though the situation had changed, Chenga still felt a bit curious. Lui Dao shook his head and said with a smile, speaking of which, we both had the same feeling. It's just that we didn't think too much about it. Really? How was I strange? For example, Junior Martial Brother, you've always been unable to grow taller. Chenga was stunned. She couldn't help but laugh. I can't do anything about that, Lui Dao nodded. At that time, Junior Martial Brother Qin said Junior Martial Brother Yi was a man with a woman's appearance, so there was nothing to be surprised about. We thought about it and agreed, you really looked like a woman. Now it's really like that, so I'm not very surprised. He actually said that? Chenga muttered to herself. No wonder he didn't look surprised at that time. It turned out he already knew about it. In fact, that was true. Nothing could be hidden from him. Upon seeing her expression, Lui Dao hesitated for a long time. In the end, he still couldn't help but ask, Junior Martial Brother Yi, Junior Martial Brother Qin, he's very good. Chenga smiled, but there was a hint of coldness in her smile. He's unimaginably good. He's better than you and me. These 3 words were spoken with great emphasis. The coldness in her smile disappeared in a flash, almost making Lui Dao think he was hallucinating. She immediately said, let's not talk about this anymore. Senior Martial Brother Lu, I've been away from Mount Yunwu for so long. Can you tell me what happened after we parted? Lui Dao swallowed the questions in his heart and nodded. Of course. He thought for a moment, then said, let's start from when Junior Martial Brother left Mount Yunwu. At that time, my current master thought highly of me and accepted me as an inner court disciple. I also obtained a foundation building pill. After my injuries were healed, I entered closed-door meditation for half a year. I didn't expect my luck to be so good that I really built my foundation. It was only after I finished building my foundation and came out of closed-door meditation that I learned about Junior Martial Brothers. Junior martial brother Su unexpectedly died, and the three of you went missing at the same time. At that time I lived with the four of you, but now I'm the only one left. Louis Dao looked lonely. He was an individual cultivator, so he valued friendships more than cultivators from cultivation groups. When that accident happened that year, he was also worried for a long time. It was precisely because of this that he was so excited to see Mo Tiange was still alive. The sect didn't give any explanation for Junior Martial Brother Jiang and Junior Martial Brother Qin's disappearance, but you, Junior Martial Brother Yi, were labeled as a traitor. They said you were greedy for money and killed Junior Martial Brother Jiang Chengxian. I naturally didn't believe it, but since I couldn't find you, I could only give up. Now that I know the truth, I finally understand how shameless Jiang clan is. Fortunately, they learned their lesson. At this point, Mo Tiange was puzzled and asked, "What lesson did they learn?" Louis Dao said, "I don't know which expert the two martial uncles of Jiang clan offended, but one night, Branch Master Jiang was seriously injured. The other martial uncle was also found and was also seriously injured. From then on, Jiang clan declined. Later on, they had no choice but to relinquish the position of branch master." Seeing Mo Tiange's shocked expression as well as understanding, Louis Dao couldn't help but ask, "Could it be that Junior Martial Brother Yi knows who it was?" "I think I know." Mo Tiange quickly regained her composure. "Senior Martial Brother Lu, how are you doing on Mount Yunwu now?" "Not bad." Louis Dao looked happy when she mentioned this matter. "My master already advanced to the core formation realm, and Jiang clan no longer has the final say on Mount Yunwu. I'm doing very well." Judging from his expression, he indeed seemed to be doing very well. Mo Tiange also felt happy for him. The atmosphere between the two of them was finally filled with the joy of reuniting after a long time. Louis Dao took this opportunity to say, "There's another good thing. Junior Martial Brother Yi will definitely be very happy to hear it." Louis Dao wanted to pretend to be mysterious, but with his burly appearance, acting like that was really funny. In the end, he couldn't help but say, "Zixia sect originally thought its strength would soar after it annexed Yunwu sect and Jindao school and could become a great cultivation group. However, because of the foundation building pills incident, the three groups suffered disastrous losses. Not long after, their nascent soul grandmaster encountered an accident in his cultivation. Now the three groups' strength is greatly damaged. Not to mention becoming a great cultivation group, they can't even control us in Jindao school anymore." "So you're saying that Yunwu sect and Jindao school have actually separated from Zixia sect?" "More or less." Louis Dao nodded. "Zixia sect only dared to treat our two groups like this because they have a nascent soul cultivator as their backer. Right now, their nascent soul grandmaster is as good as dead, and their elite disciples have also suffered disastrous losses. How could they have the time to deal with us? Junior Martial Brother Yi, you're not an outsider, so there's no harm in me saying some things. We've already joined hands with Jindao school. When the time comes, we'll deal with Zixia sect together." Flames of hatred emerged in Louis Dao's eyes. Back then, there were only 5 people in the house. He considered himself the eldest martial brother and took good care of everyone else. In the end, Su Jingji was killed while fighting over the foundation building pills. Louis Dao was also enraged. Now that he had a chance to take revenge, he naturally agreed. "Senior Martial Brother Lu, if I can't go to East Kunwu, you have to help me," Mo Tiange said coldly. "I couldn't avenge Senior Martial Brother Su back then, but I'll avenge him sooner or later." "Correct." The two of them looked at each other and smiled. Louis Dao couldn't help but say, "Junior Martial Brother Yi, you look very beautiful now. Why did you disguise yourself as a man back then?" Mo Tiange's skin had also become thicker. In addition, the person she was praising was Louis Dao, whom she had always regarded as her elder brother. She didn't look embarrassed at all and just said with a smile, "Back then, I didn't have a backer in Yunwu sect and my aptitude wasn't good. I was worried that I'd be randomly arranged to perform dual cultivation or even be taken as a concubine, so Oh, so that's what happened." Louis Dao understood. "It's no wonder you'd think that way. It's indeed very easy for a female cultivator without a backer or aptitude to be randomly arranged. It's even possible for them to be used as human furnaces." Speaking of this, Mo Tiange suddenly thought of something. "Right, Senior Martial Brother Lu, how are Senior Martial Sister Murong and Senior Martial Sister Wang?" When she mentioned them, a trace of disappointment finally appeared on Louis Dao's face, but he soon smiled again. "Junior Martial Brother Yi, you don't have to worry about them. Junior Martial Sister Murong has the full support of her clan. Although she didn't succeed in building her foundation the first time, she just built it not long ago. As for Junior Martial Sister Wang and Junior Martial Sister Shen, the former sect head of Zixia sect lost his power. His son had an accident, so Junior Martial Sister Shen is already free. Although Junior Martial Sister Wang is still married to that person because she's always been very capable, she's now standing out in Zixia sect. This time, we cooperated with Junior Martial Sister Wang and Junior Martial Sister Shen. Oh, the two of them have also built their foundations. So that's what happened. This was better than she had imagined. Presumably, Wang Qinyi would also be able to leave the Sea of Suffering soon. Chapter 147. The Soul Formation Ceremony to celebrate Lord Taoist Xuannin's successful advancement to the nascent soul realm took several months to prepare. Mo Chenga was so busy that she even reduced her cultivation time to 6 hours a day. Not only her but all the other elite disciples also did the same. The reason was that there were too many guests. Not only did the invited cultivation groups come, but even unknown cultivation groups in Eastern Kunwa like Yunwu sect also came to congratulate them. The more cultivation groups that came, the more conflicts there were. Some cultivation groups or cultivators that had grudges against each other met here, and it was really like when enemies saw each other, their eyes blazed with hatred. Just like when Mo Chenga received the two people she met that day, quarreling was just a small matter, but there were also fights that developed. This made Xianqing school cultivators busy again. Fortunately, these people restrained themselves. They knew this was Xianqing school, so they didn't go too far. After several months of busyness, the soul formation ceremony finally began. On this day the sky was clear and the sun was bright. More than 5,000 Xianqing school disciples and several thousand guests who came to congratulate them all gathered in the square on the main peak of Mount Taikang. Mo Chenga stood among the elite disciples and looked at the many cultivators in front of the main hall. Advancing to the nascent soul realm was a matter of great importance. In addition, there were several thousand guests watching the ceremony, so it was related to the school's reputation. All of Xianqing school's nascent soul cultivators attended the ceremony. Even Lord Taoist Jinghe wore the school's Taoist robe in a well-behaved manner. Most of the core formation cultivators also attended the ceremony. Among these cultivators, Mo Chenga saw everyone she could think of except one person. There were also nascent soul and core formation cultivators she was familiar with who came to congratulate her. This could be said to be the most spectacular gathering of high-level cultivators Mo Chenga had ever seen since she started cultivating. It wasn't until now that she truly felt how powerful Xianqing School was. This wasn't Mount Yunwu where she used to stay. It was Xianqing School, the second cultivation group in the Celestial Pole and possibly the first cultivation group in the future. These nascent soul and core formation cultivators were the top group of cultivators in the Celestial Pole. The square with several thousand people was completely silent. Lord Taoist Jinyang was the first to stand up. His gaze slowly swept over the disciples. Every Xianqing school disciple and every low-level cultivator from other cultivation groups who came to congratulate them felt his gaze on them. Honored guests and disciples, today is our Xianqing school's Lord Taoist Xuannin's soul formation ceremony to advance to the nascent soul realm. For this reason, I would like to express my gratitude to the guests who came from afar. Some of you traveled thousands of miles to come here, so on behalf of Xianqing School, I would like to express my gratitude. Furthermore, I would like to welcome everyone once again. Lord Taoist Jinyang nodded to the people around him and cupped his hands in greeting. With his status as a late-stage nascent soul cultivator, even ordinary nascent soul cultivators and core formation cultivators wouldn't dare to accept his greeting, let alone Qi refinement and foundation establishment cultivators. They all bowed in return. I won't waste any more words. The nascent soul formation ceremony will begin now. As soon as Lord Taoist Jinyang finished speaking, celestial music started to play. Lord Taoist Xuannin, who was wearing a Chengquan Taoist robe and a pair of 8 trigram shoes, passed through the crowd and slowly walked forward. Lord Taoist Xuannin successfully advanced to the nascent soul realm. Although he was more than 400 years old, he could still be considered a young man. Now he looked a lot younger and looked like he was in his early 30s. He also shaved his long beard, which didn't lose his dignity but also gave people a feeling of youth and vigor. However, Mo Chenga was still a bit surprised. She never took a good look at this martial Uncle Xuannin's appearance. Now that she saw him, he could actually be considered handsome. Sure enough, cultivators were naturally beautiful when they were young. Lord Taoist Xuannin walked to the front of the stage. Under Lord Taoist Jinyang's guidance, he first paid his respects to the 3 Pure Ones patriarchs, then reported to the head Grand Supreme Elder and accepted the title of Grand Supreme Elder conferred on him. Soon after, he paid his respects to his teacher and knelt to receive his admonishment. My disciple Xianyin, you have a steady temperament, are intelligent and are sensible. I'm very pleased that you've advanced to the nascent soul realm today. From now on, I hope you won't be arrogant or rash and achieve the great Tao. When he said that, Mo Qingge finally realized that Lord Taoist Jinghe never acted irresponsibly when it came to important matters. Now, in front of thousands of disciples, he was wearing a Qinghuan Taoist robe and had a solemn expression, giving him the imposing manner of a great master. Lord Taoist Xianyin knelt and kowtowed. This was also the last time he performed the formal master-disciple etiquette to Lord Taoist Jinghe. From now on, with his identity as a nascent soul cultivator, he didn't need to kneel and kowtow to anyone. Thank you for your teachings, Master. Xianyin will never forget Master's hundreds of years of teaching. Lord Taoist Jinghe showed a gratified expression. You've already stepped into the great Tao. From now on you'll set up your own school. You don't need to call me Master. You only need to keep our master-disciple relationship in your heart. Yes, disciple will obey Master's order. Then Lord Taoist Jinyang said, Thank you, Master is done. Please rise. Lord Taoist Xianyin stood up and stood at the end of the school's nascent soul cultivators according to Lord Taoist Jinyang's instruction, signaling the end of the ceremony. The whole process took less than an hour. At that moment, Lord Taoist Jinyang issued an order for the disciples to withdraw and the guests to take their seats. Although cultivators like them didn't need to eat mortal food, the most important part of entertaining guests was still the banquet. Thousands of jade tables were placed up and down the main peak of Xianqing School. The guests were invited to take their seats and were accompanied by Xianqing School disciples. Mo Qingge also received this task. She was in charge of entertaining female guests. Female guests were treated more favorably than male guests, so they were all arranged indoors. This was Mo Qingge's first time gathering with so many female cultivators, so she couldn't help but feel dizzy. There was no other reason. The fragrance was too strong. The female cultivators who could come to Xianqing School to congratulate them all had a certain status in the school. Each of them considered themselves as fairies. As fairies, their every movement naturally carried a strange fragrance. If it was only one, it wouldn't be a big deal, but this layer of women mixed with all kinds of fragrances. Mo Qingge almost fainted from the smell. In the end, she simply sealed her nose with spiritual aura and pretended she couldn't smell anything. However, this time really broadened her horizons. It turned out female cultivators in the cultivation world were like this. In the beginning, she disguised herself as a man in Yunwu's sect. Later, when she came to Xianqing School, although she was with Luo Fengxue and other female cultivators, Xianqing School was a Dao school. Most of the female cultivators also dressed in Taoist robes. The few people she was close to all wore plain clothes. For such a big event, the other 6 great cultivation groups naturally all came. 3 female cultivators from Tiandao sect came, but they all wore 3 different kinds of clothes. One was dressed like a fairy floating in the air. One was dressed like a witch whose important parts were wrapped in black cloth, revealing a large part of her snow-white skin. And one was dressed like a standard sect uniform with light purple and white borders. It was said that Tiandao sect's disciples were a mix of good and bad people and came from all kinds of backgrounds. Judging from their clothes, it was indeed true. Then came Gujin sect's disciples. Gujin sect was a sect of sword cultivators, so their disciples had to be plain. They all wore green and white clothes and carried long swords. Because of the conflict she had with Gujin sect's cultivators before, Mo Qingge didn't have a good impression of Gujin sect. Therefore, these female cultivators from Gujin sect were entertained by other disciples. Then came Zhengfa sect. Although Zhengfa sect's main branch wasn't in Kunwu, it was a dominant sect in the north, so its power couldn't be underestimated. Just like Xianqing School, Zhengfa sect was also a Dao school. Their female disciples also wore blue and white Taoist robes and looked plain. However, the blue color of their Taoist robes was a kind of blue-green. Xianqing School's Taoist robes were mostly white with light blue embellishments, but they wore blue-green robes with white coats on the outside. Biyun sect's female disciples had a different kind of elegance. Biyun sect was a very peculiar cultivation group. First of all, it recruited the most female disciples. Second, its disciples were all very beautiful regardless of whether they were male or female. Finally, their dual cultivation technique was very famous. Biyun sect's uniform was white clothes. When these female disciples wore them, they looked as elegant as fairies, clear and beautiful. There were also Lingshou sect's female disciples. Their uniform was yellow. Although they weren't as elegant as Biyun sect's female disciples, they were more beautiful and adorable. The hem of their clothes was embroidered with a qilin, which was said to be the mount of Lingshou sect's founding grandmaster. As for Danding School, because it was seriously injured, it only had one female disciple. She sat silently on the side, and her clothes were also ordinary. Apart from them, the female disciples of the other slightly inferior small cultivation groups all had different styles. Most of them didn't wear their sect's uniform. Most of them were dressed in enchanting and beautiful clothes. Mo Chinga guessed that it was precisely because their cultivation groups weren't as good as the 7 great cultivation groups that they cared more about beauty. In contrast, most of the disciples of the 7 great cultivation groups wore their sect's uniform. In terms of beauty and temperament, they weren't inferior at all. What satisfied Mo Chinga was that although her appearance wasn't bad, it wasn't too outstanding among such a large group of female cultivators, which was exactly what Mo Chinga wanted. As a woman, there were very few who didn't want to be beautiful, but she always knew that as a female cultivator, it was best if her appearance wasn't too bad. If she had a little bit of beauty, people would generally treat her kindly, but she also didn't pose a threat. Male cultivators wouldn't have thoughts of forcibly occupying her, and female cultivators also wouldn't feel jealous. There were too many beauties in the cultivation world. If her appearance wasn't amazing, she would most likely be classified as ugly. If she stood among a group of beauties and still looked very beautiful, she would become the target of many high-level cultivators. Therefore it was best to be just right. At this moment, the fairies had already been invited to take their seats. These fairies naturally wouldn't talk loudly like male cultivators. Instead, the whole side hall was filled with the soft and gentle sounds of birds talking. However, the content of their conversations was a little discordant. The people in Mo Chinga's vicinity were all female cultivators from medium-sized cultivation groups. A haughty-looking woman cast a sidelong glance at the opposite side, then said to a fellow disciple sitting next to her, "Junior Marshal Sister, why do some people have no self-awareness? The people who came to congratulate us are all elite disciples from various cultivation groups. How could some people with ordinary aptitudes who advanced to the foundation-building realm only because they were blessed by their ancestors actually have the guts to participate in the soul formation ceremony? If word of this got out, it would really make people laugh to death." The female cultivator sitting next to her nodded obediently. The woman sitting across from her sneered and said, "Speaking of which, some people's sights are stuck on what happened 800 years ago. They think their aptitudes are a bit better and they reincarnated into a good family, so they always feel like they're high and mighty. They don't even realize they've been overtaken and left behind, and they're still looking at things with their old eyes." The haughty-looking woman's face twisted. Obviously she'd been spoiled since she was a child. She could mock people, but her self-restraint wasn't very good. The woman who also ridiculed her laughed and even gave her a flirtatious look. "Senior Marshal Sister Yuan, don't you think so?" The haughty woman received her flirtatious look and angrily slammed the table. "He Rushuan. You shameless fox." The woman called He Rushuan was indeed a bit beautiful. More importantly, her figure was extremely charming. Although this haughty woman called Senior Marshal Sister Yuan could also be considered beautiful, she lost this aspect of her charm. He Rushuan wasn't angry when she heard what the woman said. Instead, she deliberately giggled and said, "Senior Marshal Sister Yuan, are you still angry with me? I already told you, it's Senior Marshal Brother Zheng who likes me. I don't have that kind of intention. Why are you angry with me?" On the surface she was explaining, but she was secretly mocking her. This Senior Marshal Sister Yuan was so angry that her whole body trembled. She said angrily, "He Rushuan, do you really think you're something good? You're nothing but trash who sleeps in one bed and then sleeps in another. You don't even know how many men you've slept with." This sentence greatly broadened Mo Tienga's horizons. As it turned out, these ethereal fairies also knew how to say this kind of vulgar quarrel between women in the secular world. They weren't any different from those male cultivators. Upon hearing what she said, He Rushuan's expression finally changed a little. However, her anger only lasted for a moment before she quickly concealed it. She once again giggled and said, "Look at what Senior Marshal Sister Yuan said. If you want to sleep with someone, you have to sleep with someone else first. You're not like some people who strip naked and lie on someone else's bed, only to be thrown off. As a woman, it's really too shameful." Her raised eyebrows were clearly directed at that Senior Marshal Sister Yuan. It was obvious who she was talking about. Sure enough, Senior Marshal Sister Yuan's face flushed. This was obviously her secret. She never thought she'd talk about it in front of so many people, so she immediately shouted, What nonsense are you talking about? Whether I'm talking nonsense or not, Senior Marshal Sister Yuan knows very well, don't you? He Rushuan covered her mouth and smiled. She then lowered her head and drank her wine in a gentle and elegant manner. You, Senior Marshal Sister Yuan stood up angrily and made a fighting stance. Seeing that the situation was far from good, Mo Chenga immediately stopped watching the show and stood up. Senior Marshal Sister, please forgive me for not being a good host. It's none of your business. Before Mo Chenga could finish, that Senior Marshal Sister Yuan angrily interrupted her. I want to settle accounts with this shameless foxy woman. Before Mo Chenga could say anything, He Rushuan already cut in. Senior Marshal Sister Yuan, we're at Shenqing School. The master of this Senior Marshal Sister talking to you is Lord Daoist Jinghe. He's a dignified middle-stage nascent soul cultivator, unlike Marshal Uncle Yuan who's only in the early stage of the core formation realm. On the surface she was talking about Mo Chenga, but she was secretly pointing out Senior Marshal Sister Yuan's identity, causing Senior Marshal Sister Yuan to suffer a loss in silence. However, she also pointed out that Mo Chenga's identity was different from the others. She wasn't a small disciple without any background like the one she used to show off in the school. This Senior Marshal Sister Yuan still had a bit of rationality left. She immediately snorted angrily and sat down. A victorious smile appeared on He Rushuan's face. Mo Chenga saw this and smiled at that Senior Marshal Sister Yuan. It's good that Senior Marshal Sister can understand. I apologize for not being a good host. Fortunately, this Senior Marshal Sister Yuan wasn't an idiot. After He Rushuan pointed out her identity, she knew she couldn't afford to offend Mo Chenga, even though she still couldn't put down her pride. She still stood up and saluted Mo Chenga. I was too presumptuous. Please forgive me, Senior Marshal Sister. Mo Chenga smiled and brushed this matter aside. It's just a trivial matter. No need to take it to heart. Now that peace had been restored, Mo Chenga secretly gave He Rushuan a meaningful glance. She could see that this Senior Marshal Sister Yuan had a simple and arrogant personality. If it wasn't because of He Rushuan's provocation, she wouldn't have lost her composure like this. Fortunately, He Rushuan was a smart person. Upon seeing Mo Chenga's meaningful glance, she returned a smile, allowing Mo Chenga to heave a sigh of relief. Now that the matter on this side was over, Mo Chenga's sharp ears picked up another incident at the table. Two female cultivators were comparing beauty and mocking each other's attire. One of them said, "Big Sister Jin, your clothes today aren't bad. Unfortunately, they're too white. They're so white that they look like they're attending a funeral." The other one retorted sarcastically, "Little Sister Wan, your clothes are also very beautiful, but they're too red. They're so red that other people would think you're holding a dual cultivation ceremony if they saw you." Big Sister Jin is too polite. "Your hairpin is pretty good, but it's yellow like there's a banana stuck in it. How can it compare to Little Sister Wan's white jade double phoenix hairpins? From afar, it looks like there's a white radish on top of your head." Some people whose cultivation wasn't high enough burst out laughing. However, the two women glared at them angrily. "What are you laughing at? You're rude." Fortunately, the one who laughed thought this show was very amusing, so she didn't mind. She just waved her hand and buried her head in her laughter. The two women continued to flatter each other. "Big Sister Jin, when did you change your bracelet? I thought you'd wear a bracelet until you died." "That's because Little Sister Wan rarely pays attention to it. A good bracelet can naturally be matched with many clothes. It's just a matter of trying something new once in a while, unlike Little Sister Wan who changes her bracelet every day. Unfortunately, they're all secular goods. They can't even be considered spirit tools. Although secular goods are cheap, you have to spend a lot of effort to find them. This is the cultivation world. There are too many spirit tools and the like here. They're crudely made and aren't much better than secular goods. The workmanship isn't exquisite, so they can't be matched with clothes at all." "Big Sister Jin, your clothes are made of cloud brocade, right? That's rare. Unfortunately, it seems like cloud brocade can't be made into magic tools. The quality is a bit lacking. If I didn't look carefully, I would have thought it was made of fish belly. How could it compare to Little Sister Wan's pearl ornaments? I don't know which year they're from, but they don't have any spiritual aura at all. They're dull and don't even have a bright color. They look like fish scales." "I say, little sister, if you lack pearls you can just come to Big Sister. Our family happens to have a lake that produces good pearls with spiritual aura. They can be made into spirit tools or magic tools." Mo Chenga glanced at the steamed fish on the table and lost her appetite. How could I dare to trouble Big Sister? Although our family isn't as big as Big Sister Jin's, no matter where you go, our family has a branch. If Big Sister Jin wants some new goods, you can just call us. There's no need to be polite. At this point, their gazes met, sparks flying everywhere. Our family doesn't have anything. Why would we need little sister Wan to worry about us like this? Big Sister Jin hasn't changed her clothes much in a year, and they're all the same colors and styles from several years ago. Little sister naturally has to be more careful when you see them. The two of them moved closer and closer, their gazes filled with ruthlessness. The two female cultivators were both aura-refining disciples, so they were also served by ordinary female disciples. That female disciple was still a little girl, so when she saw that the two of them had no one else in their eyes, she trembled and didn't dare to step forward to persuade them. Upon seeing this, Mo Chinga stood up, walked to the side of the little girl from Shenqing School and gently put down her wine cup. Upon noticing her arrival, the two female cultivators finally stopped throwing daggers at each other and turned their gazes towards her. Upon seeing that she was a foundation-building cultivator, they promptly smiled and said, "Martial uncle." Mo Chinga raised her hand, stopping the two of them from saluting her. She then said with a smile, "Mrs., please forgive me for my poor hospitality. Allow me to offer you a toast." How could they dare to refuse a toast from a foundation-building cultivator? They immediately stood up and drank. Mo Chinga smiled and patted the shoulder of the little girl standing next to her, hinting for her to sit down. She said, "This little grand disciple of mine doesn't really know how to talk, so I hope Mrs. can forgive her and help greet others. Thank you in advance." After downing her cup, Mo Chinga gave them a final nod, then turned around and walked back. The little girl behind her said in a low voice, "Thank you, Grandmaster." Upon hearing the title Grandmaster, the two women revealed hesitant expressions. In the end, they whispered to the little girl and asked her about her identity. They no longer mocked and ridiculed each other. Mo Chinga returned to her seat and rubbed her neck tiredly. These so-called fairies weren't much different from mortal women. Getting along with them was really tiring. Chapter 148. Before Mo Chinga could finish twisting her neck, Lord Daoist Jinghe's maid, Mingxia, came to deliver a message. "Martial Uncle Mo, Grandmaster invites you to the main hall." Once he said that, Mo Chinga immediately had a bad premonition. Although her cheap master wouldn't make any mistakes when it came to important matters, now that the announcement was over, her master would most likely revert to his old, frivolous temperament. Mo Chinga refused without thinking. "I can't let go of the matters here for the time being. Help me tell master that I'll go there when I have time." Mingxia replied with an expression that said, "Grandmaster was right. Grandmaster said that if he can't let go of the matters here for the time being, I'll stay here to replace Martial Uncle until he comes back." Mo Chinga was speechless. "That being the case, I'll go." After leaving the side chamber where the female cultivators resided, Mo Chinga tidied up her appearance, then walked towards the main hall. Before she reached the main hall, she could already hear the loud laughter of the nascent soul ancestors. Although she didn't know what they were laughing about, Mo Chinga could still distinguish from their laughter whether it was complacency, agreement, reluctance, and so on. When Mo Chinga arrived at the entrance of the main hall, she was locked in the line of sight of the nascent soul ancestors and several nascent soul cultivators from other cultivation groups who came to congratulate her. Fortunately, her soul refining art was already somewhat successful, so Mo Chinga could still maintain her composure under the spiritual aura pressure of many nascent soul cultivators. She walked steadily to the middle of the main hall and said, "Greetings to Master, greetings to seniors." Lord Daoist Jinghe was obviously very satisfied with her performance. He waved his hand and said in an unprecedentedly kind voice, "Chinga, come here, come here." Mo Chinga obediently walked to Lord Daoist Jinghe's side and immediately heard a woman's voice, which sounded like an oriole coming out of the valley, giggling. "Brother Daoist Jinghe, this disciple of yours is only in the middle stage of the foundation building realm, but she's quite graceful in front of us nascent soul cultivators. If we, Xian Su, were only in the foundation building realm, we wouldn't be able to do this." Mo Chinga listened to the overt praise but covert criticism and instantly understood why her master called her over. The female cultivators in the side hall were showing off their aptitudes, luck, clothes, and spiritual weapons. In his eyes, they were no different from the women in the secular world. The nascent soul cultivators in the main hall couldn't get rid of the habits brought over by the secular world. They were all nascent soul cultivators, so they couldn't show off their aptitudes and magic tools, so they could only show off their disciples. Sure enough, they heard a bald nascent soul male cultivator say with a smile, with Ma Xianyin and Qin Shoujing supporting Brother Jinghe can naturally accept disciples much more freely than us. Mo Qiange listened to the nascent soul cultivators from other cultivation groups ridiculing her one after another, but she couldn't refute any of their words. She really felt angry, so she rolled her eyes at her master in a place where no one could see her. Lord Taoist Jinghe finally felt happy when he saw his little disciple's unhappy gaze. He put on a nonchalant smile and said, "I wonder which clan's disciple dares to challenge a 5th-rank demonic beast alone when he's only in the early stage of the foundation-building realm." The main hall was silent for a while. The female cultivator from before said, "But I heard it was your first disciple, Xianyin, who just advanced to the nascent soul realm, who killed that 5th-rank demonic beast. Then tell me whose disciple can escape unscathed from under the nose of a 5th-rank demonic beast alone when she's only in the early stage of the foundation-building realm." Once he said that, sure enough, no one said anything else. Lord Taoist Jinghe shook his head and sighed. Although my Shi'er is talented and has a high perception, his spiritual roots aren't outstanding. Accepting a disciple with good spiritual roots has always been my lifelong wish. Mo Qiange immediately sensed the nascent soul cultivator's spiritual senses probing her body. She stealthily peeked at them and immediately saw several nascent soul cultivators looking doubtful while the others didn't seem to care. Lord Taoist Jinghe sighed and said, "I myself have a single spiritual root. Although I'm in the middle stage of the nascent soul realm now, I don't think a single spiritual root can really help me communicate with the great Tao. Accepting Qiange as my disciple can actually solve the doubts in my heart. After all the cultivators with great divine power in the Middle Ages respected spiritual roots of the origin as the best. What's more gratifying is that my disciple's temperament, bearing, perception, and Tao heart are all excellent. When the time comes, she should be able to achieve the great Tao one step earlier than your beloved disciples." After he finished speaking, his smiling expression turned into a complacent laugh. Mo Qiange stood on the side, watching her master's undisguised complacency. She was sweating profusely in her heart. If he didn't say the last sentence, people might have mistaken him as a matchmaker. At that moment, a black-clothed male cultivator sitting near the door of the main hall said coldly, "Even if she really has excellent spiritual roots of the origin from the distant past era, I'm afraid it won't be easy for Brother Taoist Jinghe to fulfill his wish without the art of the origin." Lord Taoist Jinghe waved his sleeve disapprovingly. "Your Tiandao sect doesn't have it, but it doesn't mean our Xianqing school doesn't have it. Ever since our Xianqing school was founded, we've had countless extraordinary people. A mere art of the origin isn't a big deal, but a spiritual root of the origin that's hard to come by in several thousand years is something that can only be encountered by chance." At this point, Mo Qiange was already standing on the side with her eyes slightly lowered, pretending to be dead. She didn't feel indignant at all when her master called the art of the origin a mere art of the origin. In any case, this master of hers was very thick-skinned. The nascent soul cultivators from other cultivation groups really didn't have any reaction. However, Lord Taoist Jinyang, who fought with Lord Taoist Jinghe a few days ago and had his face covered in dirt, snorted fiercely. However, the nascent soul cultivators from other cultivation groups sitting in the main hall all looked uneasy. Every cultivation group came to congratulate Lord Taoist Xianyin of Xianqing School for advancing to the nascent soul realm. On one hand, they wanted to get along well with him in the future. On the other hand, they more or less wanted to inquire about Xianqing School's strength. But now they actually came knocking on their door and were choked by a middle-stage foundation-building disciple. Everyone's gazes towards Mo Qiange became much colder. However, with Lord Taoist Jinghe's protective and bloodthirsty temperament, he couldn't really do anything to Mo Qiange. Mo Qiange felt the temperature in the main hall drop. Soon afterward, she heard Martial Uncle Miaoi's gentle female voice saying with a chuckle, "From the foundation-building realm to the core formation realm to the nascent soul realm and then to the deification realm, only then can one be considered to have truly obtained the great Tao. Even everyone present feels that the great Tao is mysterious. Qiange's path is still long." Once she said that, the atmosphere in the main hall immediately eased up a lot. Lord Taoist Jinghe had enough of being complacent. Now that Lord Taoist Miaoi had helped him smooth things over, he felt quite satisfied. Thus, he simply closed his eyes and enjoyed the maids next to him massaging his shoulders and back. Right at that moment, Mingxia slipped in from the side door. She nervously reported to Mo Qiange in a soft voice, "Martial Uncle Mo, several senior martial sisters are fighting in the side hall." Mo Qiange frowned. "They were fine when I left. What's going on?" She then raised her eyes to look at Lord Taoist Jinghe. Lord Taoist Jinghe was obviously done showing off. He raised his hand and said indifferently, "This kind of thing is bound to happen in every big banquet. You just need to handle it properly." Although the matter in the side hall was also troublesome, it was still better than standing in the main hall and becoming a target for the nascent soul cultivators. Emo Chinga hastily cupped her hands and bowed. "Master, disciple will take her leave." She then turned around and slipped out of the main hall's side door. Lord Taoist Jinghe, who just finished showing off, was obviously in a good mood, so he only smiled at Emo Chinga's obvious escape. Emo Chinga rushed all the way from the main hall. When she rushed to the side hall, she thought she would see a mess. In the end, the female cultivators in the side hall were obviously better at handling this kind of situation than she was. In the hall, 2 female cultivators from Zhengfa sect and a female cultivator from an unknown cultivation group were fighting. The battlefield of the 3 female cultivators was surrounded by other people. Before, the distance between each jade table was the same, but now the distance between them was obviously widened. As for the other jade tables, the people sitting on them had already activated all kinds of protective measures. The 4 Xianqing school female disciples in charge of this side hall were huddled together anxiously in a corner. When they saw Emo Chinga coming in, they immediately rushed towards her. Grandmaster Emo, what should we do?" Emo Chinga rubbed the space between her eyebrows. "First, tell me how they started fighting." The female disciple who received Emo Chinga's attention before hastily answered in a soft voice. At first, the 2 martial uncles from Zhengfa sect only had a small verbal conflict. In the end, one of the martial uncles from Zhengfa sect picked up some food and gave it to the other martial uncle, saying that the food was very nutritious, but the other martial uncle didn't want to accept it. The 2 of them pushed it back and forth, but due to a moment of carelessness, the food overturned and stained the martial uncle's robe. I don't know which cultivation group that martial uncle is from. She looks delicate, but her temper is extremely fiery. Without even opening her mouth, she directly attacked and sent the martial uncle from Zhengfa sect flying with a palm strike. The female guests in this side hall were all ordinary foundation-building female cultivators, and the people sitting with them were also ordinary disciples. She was the only one with the highest status, so she wasn't afraid of offending anyone. However, no matter what, Mingxia was a nascent soul cultivator's personal maid. How could she possibly not be able to handle this kind of matter? She clearly didn't want to take the lead. However, Emo Chinga also didn't feel like investigating what Mingxia was thinking. In any case, it was enough as long as these maids didn't dare to disrespect her. Emo Chinga looked at the battlefield. One of the 2 female cultivators from Zhengfa sect was in the middle stage of the foundation building realm, while the other was in the early stage of the foundation building realm. As for the other female cultivator, she couldn't tell which cultivation group she belonged to. She was already in the late stage of the foundation building realm. Although the 2 female cultivators from Zhengfa sect were fighting 2 against 1, their techniques were immature. On the other hand, the female cultivator from Zhengfa sect was killing with every move she made. She had actually been suppressing the 2 female cultivators from Zhengfa sect until they were at a disadvantage. Emo Chinga couldn't help but frown. Before she could figure out how to mediate the situation, she heard the early stage foundation building female cultivator from Zhengfa sect scream. She was already injured. Emo Chinga hastily summoned the white silk handkerchief to block the unknown female cultivator's next attack. She then shielded the 2 female cultivators from Zhengfa sect behind her, restrained her temper and said with a chuckle, "Senior martial sister, I don't know which sect you're from, but your skills in Dao are obvious to all." Although the 2 senior martial sisters from Zhengfa sect slightly offended you, they were still injured by you. How about you give me some face and let this matter go? The female cultivator sneered coldly. "Who are you?" Emo Chinga's expression was indifferent. "I'm Emo Chinga from Xianqing School." The female cultivator smiled again. The female cultivator smiled again. "Who's your master?" Emo Chinga answered with a heavy tone, "I'm fortunate to be a disciple of my school's Lord Taoist Jinghe. May I know what advice senior martial sister has for me?" A strange expression appeared on the female cultivator's face when she heard what Emo Chinga said. Right at that moment, a sharp whistle suddenly came from outside the hall. When the female cultivator heard it, she unexpectedly pounced on Emo Chinga while laughing loudly. "Since you're old Taoist Jinghe's disciple, I might as well send you on your way." Chapter 149. Emo Chinga was startled, but she didn't have time to think. She retracted the white silk handkerchief and released it, blocking the female cultivator's fierce claw. This female cultivator's fighting method was different from the ones she'd seen before. She didn't simply use magic, she was like a martial artist from the secular world. Her hands were covered in gloves with sharp claws, and her attacks were like those of a demonic beast. When she wandered around Kunwu with her second uncle, Mo Chenga had seen one or two cultivators like this. This kind of cultivator was generally called a martial cultivator. The fighting method of martial cultivators was a combination of martial skills, similar to sword cultivators, but it relied more on the body and skills. However, martial cultivators were a side path in the cultivation world. There might not be one or two martial cultivators among 1,000 people. This female cultivator's methods weren't weak. Judging from her words, she also had a master, but Mo Chenga didn't know whose master she was. In addition, this was Shenqing school. Why did this female cultivator want to kill her just because she heard she was Lord Taoist Jinghe's disciple? Not to mention several nascent soul cultivators, but even if a core formation cultivator passed by here, killing her would be as easy as raising their hands. As these thoughts flashed through her mind, Mo Chenga once again put away the white silk handkerchief. She frowned and said coldly, "Senior martial sister, what do you mean?" The female cultivator smiled coldly but didn't answer. She still looked like she didn't want to talk to Mo Chenga, but she was actually nervous because her claw just now wasn't merciful at all. However, when Mo Chenga summoned the white silk handkerchief, it seemed she didn't use all her strength, yet she easily blocked it. She was in the late stage of the foundation building realm and had always been arrogant. She believed that even if she didn't have the power to fight against an early stage core formation cultivator, it wouldn't be difficult for her to escape unscathed. However, her claw was easily blocked by a middle stage foundation building junior. While she was nervous, she was also angry. Once she stopped, she immediately swung her claw again. Mo Chenga instantly retreated. She didn't plan to meet force with force. She was a traditional cultivator who mainly cultivated magic. When fighting against martial cultivators, it was best not to let the opponent get close to her. However, there were people everywhere in this side hall, so it was difficult for her to hide for a while. Thus, she simply stepped on the white silk handkerchief and fought closely with this female cultivator. Mo Chenga also learned how to use the Qinggong of the secular world, which helped her a lot when she was in the aura refining stage. In addition, the white silk handkerchief was extremely nimble, so even though she was in close combat with this female cultivator, she was still able to move with ease and wasn't hit by her at all. In the blink of an eye, their figures changed several times. Most of the foundation building female cultivators in the side hall couldn't even see their figures clearly, let alone the aura refining female cultivators. Their faces even turned pale from the spiritual aura pressure emitted by the two of them, completely at a loss as to what to do. Mo Chenga seized a gap and threw the shuttle of flying Apsara to entangle the female cultivator. She shouted, "What are you standing there for? Go and report to the core formation grandmaster." Only then did the other female cultivators come to their senses and wanted to leave the hall in a hubbub. The female cultivator she was fighting suddenly retreated after blocking the shuttle of flying Apsara. She smiled gloomily and said, "You want to call a core formation cultivator to deal with me? I won't fight with you. Just wait and see." After saying that, he quickly retreated. In a flash, he was out of the side hall's door. Mo Chenga didn't immediately chase after them. Instead, she turned around and said, "All of you stay here. Don't go out." The female aura refining disciples nodded repeatedly. Since the two of them were fighting and the spiritual aura pressure was already astonishing, how could they dare to go out? They could only watch as Mo Chenga followed the female cultivator out of the side hall. Mo Chenga noticed that the change in the female cultivator's attitude was caused by a whistling sound. The sound was very short and wasn't heavy. Presumably, cultivators under the foundation building realm shouldn't have heard it. However, because of the soul refining art, Mo Chenga was very sensitive to spiritual aura fluctuations. Not only did she hear the sound, but she also sensed a peculiar spiritual aura pressure that was somewhat restrained. Mo Chenga followed behind the female cultivator at a moderate distance. Sure enough, she saw that the female cultivator was heading towards the place where the spiritual aura pressure came from. Mo Chenga was suspicious. This direction was indeed the direction where the nascent soul cultivators were. Qin Jingha. All of a sudden she heard a loud shout. Mo Chenga's mind trembled and her blood and aura surged. She couldn't control herself and fell from the white silk handkerchief. She suddenly looked up and saw a surging black cloud above the main hall where the nascent soul cultivators were located. A ferocious human head could be faintly seen on the black cloud. The female cultivator Mo Tienga was chasing didn't feel this spiritual aura pressure at all. She turned around and smiled charmingly at Mo Tienga before disappearing in a flash. Mo Tienga's expression changed. She didn't have time to study what kind of technique the female cultivator used to disappear because she felt this spiritual aura pressure. Definitely belonged to a cultivator above the nascent soul realm. After this loud shout, all the nascent soul cultivators in the main hall came out. Xianqing School now had a total of 6 nascent soul cultivators. In addition to the dozen or so nascent soul guests who came to congratulate them, there were more than 20 nascent soul cultivators in total. Mo Tienga swept her gaze over them and felt relieved. With so many nascent soul cultivators, no matter how powerful the other party was, she would still be safe. She also felt strange. Not to mention there were so many nascent soul cultivators here. This was Mount Taikang. Xianqing School's great mountain protecting formation wasn't just for show, yet this person actually had the guts to break in. Moreover, judging from his momentum, he might even be a devil cultivator. Mo Tienga really didn't know how her cheap master offended such a person. When the nascent soul cultivators saw the black cloud, they either looked gloomy or puzzled. "This is Master Song Feng," someone whispered to himself. The expressions of the puzzled nascent soul cultivators changed instantly. The bald cultivator said in surprise, "Turns out he's still alive." Among this group of people, only Lord Taoist Jinyang and Lord Taoist Jinghe looked calm. At that moment, Lord Taoist Jinghe flew up and said heavily, "Song Feng, today is my disciple's nascent soul ceremony. If you want to take revenge, do it another day." A sneer came from the black cloud, and the ferocious ghost face twisted a bit. "What? Qin Jinghe also has times where he shows weakness? Your disciple's nascent soul ceremony is really a good day. If my disciple was still alive, he'd probably be able to form his nascent soul now." Lord Taoist Jinghe also sneered. "Old Song Feng, I'm giving you face. This is Xianqing School's Mount Taikang, and there are so many nascent soul cultivators here. Even if you're a late-stage nascent soul cultivator, you still have no chance of winning if we fight." Right after he finished speaking, a burst of strange laughter came from the black cloud. When the laughter stopped, the face on the cloud revealed a fierce expression. "Qin Jinghe, aren't you afraid of nothing? Do you want to bring so many people to deal with me?" Lord Taoist Jinghe's expression was calm, but he wasn't irritated. "Do you think I, Qin Jinghe, am that kind of person who only has hands but no brains? At our age, do you still want to fight for this little bit of face? I admit I can't beat you, but since that's the case, why do I still want to throw away my life?" Good. The black cloud laughed. "Qin Jinghe, I underestimated you. But today, even if all of you are here, I still want to play." Once he said that, the momentum of the black cloud suddenly became stronger, and the early-stage nascent soul cultivators below also felt suffocated. At that moment, the spiritual aura inside Mo Tienga's body was surging, and she couldn't control it for a moment, causing her to vomit a mouthful of blood. She looked around. She was at a corner, so no one could see her, so she immediately summoned the white silk handkerchief and hid the light of opening the virtual sky world by borrowing the spiritual aura turbulence of the magic weapon. Several breaths later, she entered the virtual sky world. Once she entered the virtual sky world, she swallowed a green pendant pill. After adjusting her breath for a while, she pointed at the space between her eyebrows, causing the bead to appear. She then cast an art on the bead, causing the sky of the virtual sky world to be torn open, allowing her to see the scene outside. During this time, Lord Taoist Jinyang had already stepped forward. He flew to Lord Taoist Jinghe's side and shouted, "Brother Song Feng, if my junior martial brother has offended you in any way, please forgive him for the time being for my sake. Today is the soul formation ceremony for our Xianqing School's new nascent soul cultivators. If there's anything, let's talk about it another day, okay?" The face on the black cloud opened its mouth and laughed, then its voice became a bit gentler. "Brother Jinyang, we haven't seen each other for a long time. Your Tao is even more exquisite now." Lord Taoist Jinyang also smiled and cupped his hands. "You're too polite. Brother Song Feng hasn't shown up for hundreds of years, so we old guys really miss you." "Really? Then I'll pay you a visit another day." Upon hearing this, Lord Taoist Jinyang thought Master Song Feng accepted his proposal, so he immediately said, "In that case, thank you for your kindness, Brother Song Feng." "Don't thank me first." Master Song Feng snorted coldly and changed his tone. He said coldly, "Brother Taoist Jinyang, let's leave tomorrow's matters to tomorrow. Today I'm here for Qin Jinghe, so you don't need to pretend to be friends with me. Master Song Feng spoke rudely. He actually regarded Lord Taoist Jinyang, a dignified late-stage nascent soul cultivator, as a junior. Lord Taoist Jinyang's smiling face suddenly turned purple. He was a late-stage nascent soul cultivator and the first Sikh Grand Supreme Elder of the number 2 cultivation group in the Celestial Pole. When had anyone ever spoken to him like this? He said with a cold expression, "Brother Song Feng, if you don't give me face, I can't do anything about it. However, today is a good day for Xianqing School, and your excellency came to look for my junior martial brother's fault. As his senior martial brother, I can't just stand by and watch. If your excellency has something to say, just say it." The meaning of this sentence was obviously a threat. If Master Song Feng didn't take a step back, Lord Taoist Jinyang and Lord Taoist Jinghe would besiege him together. Ha ha ha. The black cloud laughed. Su Jinyang, although you and I are both late-stage nascent soul cultivators, I'll be honest. Your cultivation level isn't inferior to mine, but you're definitely inferior to me in a fight of magical powers. Do you admit defeat? Lord Taoist Jinyang's expression didn't change. People of Xianqing School are never afraid to admit our shortcomings. Although I'm slightly inferior to you in a fight of magical powers, it'll still be difficult for you to defeat me. If I join forces with junior martial brother Jinghe, hee. Lord Taoist Jinyang just smiled, but his gaze was cold. The black cloud surged, and the face on it revealed a fierce expression, staring at the two people in front of it. Upon hearing this, Mo Tiange understood this person's identity. In the Celestial Pole, there were 5 late-stage nascent soul cultivators, 2 from Tiandao sect, 1 each from Xianqing School and Gujin sect, and 1 individual cultivator, Master Song Feng. From a cultivator's point of view, this Master Song Feng was quite amazing. It was said that 1,000 years ago, he was only a cultivator from a small cultivation group. Later, that cultivation group was exterminated and he disappeared. Several hundred years later, this person reappeared in the Celestial Pole and unexpectedly advanced into the nascent soul realm. Mo Tiange didn't know what kind of fated chances he encountered. In fact, he only had 3 spiritual roots, so it was already very good for him to be able to cultivate until the core formation realm, but who would have thought that he would later advance into the late stage of the nascent soul realm? This person's knowledge was very diverse. His cultivation technique was close to the devil's art, and he was very good in fights of magical powers. Even Gujin sect's sword cultivators who were good at fights of magical powers were defeated by him. Gujin sect's late-stage nascent soul cultivator, Venerable Swordsman Yuanying, once personally sought him out to reason things out, but he also didn't gain any advantage from him. In this way, although there were 5 late-stage nascent soul cultivators in the Celestial Pole, most people still thought Master Song Feng was the strongest cultivator in the Celestial Pole. However, this person's temperament was somewhat similar to Lord Taoist Jinghe. They were both very aggressive and bloodthirsty. Lord Taoist Jinghe, on the other hand, was a member of a Tao school, so he wouldn't kill the innocent and rarely took people's lives. However, this Master Song Feng didn't seem like a high-level cultivator at all. He actually regarded mental cultivation as nothing and was temperamental. Sometimes he even killed mortals, which was very despicable. Therefore, not many people were willing to admit that he was the number 1 cultivator in the Celestial Pole. However, Mo Tiange heard that this Master Song Feng hadn't appeared for 100 years. With his lifespan of more than 1,000 years, many people thought he had passed away and there were only 4 late-stage nascent soul cultivators left in the Celestial Pole. She didn't expect him to appear at Xianqing School today, and he even came to cause trouble for her master. How did Master offend this malefic star? He mentioned his disciple just now. Could it be that Master killed Master Song Feng's disciple? As Mo Tiange was thinking, she heard Master Song Feng say, "Qin Jinghe, where's your precious disciple, Qin Shoujing? It's such a good day, but he actually didn't come out?" Lord Taoist Jinghe chuckled and said, "My disciple is now in the late stage of the core formation realm. He's in closed-door meditation and won't come out unless he forms his nascent soul." Nascent soul. The black cloud smiled gloomily. This brat is really lucky. He reached the late stage of the core formation realm so quickly. But with his aptitude, it won't be easy for him to form his nascent soul, right? Lord Taoist Jinghe smiled and said, "Old Song Feng, with your aptitude you can form your nascent soul and even advance to the late stage of the nascent soul realm. What can't my disciple do?" Meh. The face on the black cloud threw its head back and laughed. "Ah, Qin Jinghe, you're comparing Qin Shoujing to me? I don't want to say this, but you think too highly of him. Although the face on the black cloud was blurry, everyone could feel the contempt in his eyes. In West Kunwu, if anyone mocked Qin Shoujing about his cultivation, they would most likely be regarded as jealousy. A cultivator with double spiritual roots was actually more talented than many cultivators with single or mutated spiritual roots. This was already enough to explain the problem. But the one who said this was Master Song Feng, a late-stage nascent soul cultivator, so no one would say anything about him. A late-stage nascent soul cultivator naturally had the qualifications to look down on a mere core formation cultivator, even if that person was a rare genius who formed his gold core within 100 years. Lord Daoist Jinghe, who was originally as impatient as a child, was very calm today. He wasn't provoked in the slightest. Instead, he said with a smile, "Is that so? I say, old Song Feng, you think too highly of yourself. I don't want to say this, but aren't you a monster that's neither human nor devil nor monster? It's fine if you show off in front of others, but you have to do it in front of me. Aren't you afraid of being laughed at?" His words were full of sarcasm, making Master Song Feng fly into a rage. "Qin Jinghe, you, what about me?" Lord Daoist Jinghe was still smiling, but Mo Qiange had been his disciple for a long time, so she keenly sensed the killing intent in his eyes. It seemed her master already wanted to make a move. "Alas, look at you. You clearly know I know everything about you, but why did you still come here to make me laugh at you?" Many nascent soul cultivators were baffled by what he said. Did Lord Daoist Jinghe know some secret about Master Song Feng? All of a sudden, the black cloud surged, and its spiritual aura pressure instantly pressed down. Lord Daoist Jinyang immediately took out an 8 trigrams disc. It was unknown what this disc was made of, but aside from the 8 trigrams painted on it, it was completely brown. As soon as Lord Daoist Jinyang took it out, it swelled up against the wind. When it was about the same size as the black cloud, the eyes of the 8 trigrams shot out 2 rays of light, one black and one white, which interweaved into a net and firmly surrounded the hall. It was actually protecting cultivators with low cultivation levels from the oppression of the spiritual aura pressure. Insignificant tricks. I'll fight you first. The black cloud also swelled up in an instant, almost rushing towards Lord Daoist Jinghe. Mo Qiange was inside the virtual sky world, so although she didn't feel it, she could tell from the reaction of Lord Daoist Jinghe's maids, Mingxia and Wanxiu, that the spiritual aura fluctuation was very strong. Fortunately, there were many nascent soul cultivators present, so Lord Daoist Xianyin waved his hand and added a protective cover to the two of them, stopping them from vomiting blood. If she was outside the virtual sky world, Mo Qiange definitely wouldn't have such an opportunity to carefully observe the fight of magical powers between top nascent soul cultivators. Right now, she wasn't worried about her own safety or the safety of Lord Daoist Jinghe and Lord Daoist Jinyang, so she focused on observing. As soon as Master Song Feng made this move, Lord Daoist Jinghe and Lord Daoist Jinyang each occupied a position. Although these two old men had a fight not long ago, it could be seen that they had excellent tacit understanding in front of a formidable enemy. In a flash, they formed an encirclement. Soon after, Lord Daoist Jinghe took out a gourd while Lord Daoist Jinyang took out a small stone. After the black cloud swelled up, Lord Daoist Jinghe's gourd immediately spurted out fire. Lord Daoist Jinyang's stone was thrown out and instantly became bigger. Mo Qiange wanted to take a closer look, but her realm was too low. How could she clearly see the body movements of middle and late-stage nascent soul cultivators in a fight of magical powers? She only saw flying sand and stones, bursts of fire and surging black cloud, but she couldn't see what was going on. Lord Daoist Jinghe had fire spiritual roots while Lord Daoist Jinyang had earth spiritual roots. When the two of them joined forces to fight, they really lived up to the saying, covered in dust and dirt. Even though the fire was on the other party, they still sprinkled dirt on the other party. Fortunately, Master Song Feng was now a black cloud, so he wasn't afraid of dirt at all. Otherwise, he'd probably be in a very difficult situation like the day they finished their fight. After a while, the fight between the three of them finally stopped. Mo Qiange finally saw that Lord Daoist Jinghe and Lord Daoist Jinyang couldn't defeat Master Song Feng even though they joined hands. However, judging from the closed eyes of the face on the black cloud, he probably wasn't feeling well either. The three of them separated. Lord Daoist Jinghe and Lord Daoist Jinyang sat cross-legged, while the black cloud closed its eyes and rested. The other nascent soul cultivators from Shenqing School could see that Master Song Feng couldn't do anything to Lord Daoist Jinghe and Lord Daoist Jinyang, so they didn't make a move. After a long time, the black cloud opened its eyes first, and its voice came from inside. "Qin Jinghe, Tell that brat of yours that I'll take revenge for killing my disciple sooner or later. He'd better stay in the sect until I pass away, or else I'll definitely take his life. The black cloud easily broke through the light net laid by Lord Daoist Jinyang's 8 trigrams disc and suddenly left. Mo Qingge heaved a sigh of relief in the virtual sky world. Since Master Song Feng dared to come here so boldly, he probably knew no one could stop him, right? That was reasonable. Nascent soul cultivators were hard to kill, let alone a late-stage nascent soul cultivator with many secret techniques and treasures. Judging from these nascent soul seniors' indifferent reactions, they probably didn't intend to stop him at all. However, she didn't know what Master Song Feng meant when he said he killed his disciple. Could it be that it was Qin Shoujing who killed his disciple? After thinking it over, Mo Qingge once again thought about the female cultivator who fought with her in the beginning. If she didn't have the magic weapon Zhong Muling gave her, she definitely wouldn't have been able to fight that female cultivator so easily. That woman sneaked into Xianqing school and disappeared when Master Song Feng appeared. Could it be that she was also Master Song Feng's disciple or grand disciple? No matter how she thought about it, she still couldn't figure it out. She shook her head and threw these thoughts to the back of her mind. This matter had nothing to do with her. Right now, she should think about how to get out without anyone noticing. Chapter 150. While Master Song Feng had just left and the scene was in chaos, Mo Qingge sneaked out of the virtual sky world and ran towards the main hall as if she had just arrived. At this time, the core formation and foundation building cultivators who didn't dare to approach because of the spiritual aura pressure from the nascent soul cultivators also ran over. No one noticed her sudden appearance. Master. She hurriedly ran to Lord Daoist Jinghe's side, but she saw that he already looked fine and was chatting cheerfully with someone else. Mo Qingge's worried heart was completely at ease now. Judging from his appearance, his injuries just now weren't that serious. When Lord Daoist Jinghe saw her, he secretly gave her a meaningful look and waved at her. What's so urgent? Mo Qingge was dumbfounded. She pondered the meaning of his gaze and said, Master, do you need something from me? Lord Daoist Jinghe immediately cupped his hands towards the nascent soul cultivators around him and said with a smile, Fellow Taoists, there's a small matter, so I'll take my leave first. Right after he said that, he led Mingxia and Wanxiu out of the main hall with Mo Qingge. Master? Lord Daoist Jinghe didn't say anything and flew back to Clear Spring Peak with the 3 of them. Once they reached Clear Spring Peak and entered Shangqing Palace, Lord Daoist Jinghe stopped. Moss. Just as Mo Qingge was about to speak, she only managed to say one word before she felt Lord Daoist Jinghe's body swaying and suddenly falling head first. Master. Grand Master. The 3 of them paled in fright. Lord Daoist Jinghe forced himself to stand and shook his head. Don't worry. Help me to meditate. Yes. Ming Xia and Wan Qiu helped him back to his throne. The 3 of them waited at the side, watching nervously. After an unknown amount of time, Lord Daoist Jinghe's pale complexion finally regained its color. He opened his eyes and heaved a sigh of relief. I haven't seen him for several hundred years. I didn't expect old man Song Feng's demonic art to be so powerful. Mo Qingge finally understood. Lord Daoist Jinghe's injuries weren't light just now, but out of consideration for his face, he gave her a meaningful glance. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This master of hers was still the same. Mingxia Wanxiu stepped down. Mingxia and Wanxiu looked at each other and answered, Yes. Qingge, come here. Mo Qingge walked towards him, bewildered. Master? Sit. Lord Daoist Jinghe pointed at the seat next to him. If I tell you to sit, then sit. All right. She cautiously approached Lord Daoist Jinghe and cautiously looked at him, then cautiously sat down. Mo Qingge couldn't be blamed for her reaction. The current Lord Daoist Jinghe was really too amiable. He was too much like an elder. Qingge? Yes. Mo Qingge was worried. She didn't know what trick this master of hers was playing now. But this time, Lord Daoist Jinghe sighed and stared at her in a very normal manner. Do you think Master doesn't teach you anything? Mo Qingge thought for a moment, then answered honestly, regarding cultivation, Master has never taught me anything, so disciple does feel a bit baffled. However, I've had many fortuitous encounters, and my current cultivation level has far exceeded my age. What Master has taught me is exactly what I need the most. As long as you understand. Lord Daoist Jinghe relaxed when he heard her answer and saw the sincerity in her expression. He continued to sit cross-legged and meditate with his eyes closed. How much of what happened today did you see? Your disciple saw it all. Also, in the side hall, I met a female cultivator who seemed to be related to Master Song Feng. Mo Chenga then told him about the claw-wielding female cultivator in detail. After listening to her, Lord Daoist Jinghe opened his eyes and pondered. It sounds like this woman's path is indeed related to Old Man Song Feng. Among the 7 great cultivation groups, I'm the one who understands Old Man Song Feng the most. I don't know what happened to that old man in the past, but his physique is neither human nor devil. He seems to have been transformed by a foreign object. He's neither a traditional Dao cultivator nor a devil cultivator, but he's learned from the strong points of various sects, so he's so difficult to deal with. According to what you said, that woman should be a martial cultivator, and her moves carried devil aura. In my opinion, she's most likely Old Man Song Feng's disciple or grand disciple. Although you didn't lose to her this time, you must be careful if you meet her in the future. Yes, I understand. Lord Daoist Jinghe nodded then asked, do you know what happened between Master and Old Man Song Feng? Mo Chenga shook her head. Disciple only heard your conversation just now, so I roughly know it's related to senior martial brother Shoujing. Lord Daoist Jinghe chuckled softly. His expression was both helpless and proud. Yes, it was indeed that boy's fault. This Old Man Song Feng once had an extremely talented junior who had a conflict with your senior apprentice brother Shoujing. In the end he was killed. At that time Old Man Song Feng had long disappeared from the world, so I didn't take it seriously. I didn't expect he was still alive and wanted to take revenge. Alas, that old man is very vengeful. It'll be difficult to deal with him in the future. Then, Master, do you also have a grudge against Master Song Feng? Not really. Several hundred years ago, when I just advanced to the middle stage of the nascent soul realm, I went to a secret place with Old Man Song Feng, so we had some disputes. Lord Daoist Jinghe didn't say much and shook his head. Although we didn't become enemies at that time, we parted on bad terms. With her master's personality, it would be strange if he could get along with a person with a strange temper like Master Song Feng without any problems. Master Song Feng didn't have a good impression of her master, and his beloved disciple was killed by Qin Shoujing, so he naturally hated her even more. When Mo Chenga thought of this, she also felt a bit of a headache. Outsiders didn't know how long one's lifespan was after cultivating to the late stage of the nascent soul realm. Her master was already more than 800 years old, but Master Song Feng seemed to be only 1,000 years old. If her master didn't advance, he would definitely pass away before Master Song Feng. At that time, wouldn't a direct disciple like her suffer from revenge? Of course, if she didn't leave Xianqing school, she would naturally be fine. Chenga, in the future when you go out alone, you'd better not show your identity as my disciple to others unless Old Man Song Feng passes away one day or you form your nascent soul. Do you understand? Mo Chenga was stunned. Lord Daoist Jinghe had always been arrogant and domineering, but he made her do this. Obviously he wanted her to avoid this disaster. She was a bit moved and even called him master willingly. Yes, master. Seeing her like this, Lord Daoist Jinghe smiled. Child, you're probably only willing to call me master today, right? Mo Chenga lowered her head and smiled. Although this master was unreliable, his heart was as clear as a mirror. However, although she usually called him master disrespectfully, she always felt she was very lucky to have such a master. Lord Daoist Jinghe stopped smiling and said, after I formed my nascent soul, I accepted 5 disciples in total. Xianin, Qingyuan, Mingjin, Suxin and Changkong. Your original second martial brother, Qingyuan, unfortunately died early, so I later accepted another disciple and gave him the Taoist name Qingyuan. I originally didn't want to accept any more disciples, but who would have thought I'd find your senior martial brother Shoujing when I returned to Qin clan in the secular world. He's a blood-related junior with good spiritual roots, so I naturally had to take care of him, so I brought him back to Mount Taikang and accepted him as my disciple. Although this boy's spiritual roots are ordinary, his temperament is excellent and he's extremely intelligent, so I accepted him as my last disciple. Unexpectedly, he also asked me to accept you as my disciple. Sure enough, she was accepted as his disciple because of that person. Mo Chenga had long guessed it, so she didn't feel disappointed, but she couldn't feel happy either. Lord Daoist Jinghe continued to say, I originally didn't take it seriously when I accepted you as my registered disciple. At that time, I thought with your spiritual roots, it would be great if you could build your foundation and you probably wouldn't have any hope of advancing to the core formation realm, so I didn't have to teach you and you weren't considered my official disciple. Who knew you were really destined to be my disciple? Girl, don't feel wronged. Since I formally accepted you as my disciple, I'll treat you sincerely. Emo Chenga smiled. She wasn't a little girl who hadn't experienced ups and downs, so how could she feel wronged? Rest assured, Master. I understand. Lord Daoist Jinghe nodded with a smile. This is what I like about you. You're down-to-earth, strong-willed, and you never undervalue yourself. Unlike that girl from Qingyuan who was spoiled by me when she was young, At that time, I found the daughter left by your senior martial brother Qingyuan and brought back your senior martial brother Shoujing. I took the two of them with me, but who knew they wouldn't teach either of them well? Master. Lord Daoist Jinghe's rare melancholy made Emo Chenga feel uncomfortable and puzzled. Isn't senior martial brother Shoujing doing well? Presumably, he'll be able to step onto the nascent soul realm in a few decades or 100 years. You don't know the reason. Lord Daoist Jinghe shook his head. This boy has a firm Dao heart since he was a child and he's diligent in his cultivation. I used to be very proud that I could teach such a disciple, but now I realize what I've failed to teach him. He's too smart and too persistent. I used to think it was a good thing and didn't need other people to care about him, but now I realize that if his persistence is used on other things, it'll become fatal. Emo Chenga was stunned but didn't say anything. Lord Daoist Jinghe said slowly, right now he's the one I'm most worried about. Not to mention that old man Song Feng wants to seek revenge on him, but he's also plagued by demons. He's now insisting on entering closed-door meditation until he forms his nascent soul, but I'm afraid he can't overcome his inner demon in the nascent soul realm. After he finished speaking, Lord Daoist Jinghe closed his eyes and sighed. He looked exhausted. Emo Chenga was silent for a long time before she asked softly, Master, why are you telling me this? Lord Daoist Jinghe opened his eyes. His face, which had always been frivolous, now looked kind. You'll know later. After I accepted you as my disciple, I realized you're too similar to that boy from back then. No wonder he. Lord Daoist Jinghe paused for a moment then continued, I've already led him astray, so I naturally can't let you set foot on the same path. Back then, that boy also wholeheartedly cultivated and never paid attention to secular affairs, so I also didn't care. Now, after thinking about it, I think it's better to let you participate more in the school's affairs. You can see more, listen more, and in the future you won't be too persistent. Children like you don't need to worry about cultivation at all, but the way you act has to be guided well so you won't take many detours. Emo Chenga had long guessed the reason why Lord Daoist Jinghe taught her like this, but now that she heard it from his own mouth, she still felt moved. All right, Master's injuries aren't serious. Back then, when I brought you back, I said I'd let you reflect on your mistakes in closed-door meditation for 10 years, but there are still 5 years left. In the past few years, I've let you gain a lot of experience. Now that you're more or less familiar with the school's affairs, you can start your closed-door meditation from today onwards. 5 years later, when you come out of closed-door meditation, you can leave the mountain and travel around. Go. Yes, Master. Chapter 151. Auntie. A voice came from outside the cultivation room. Emo Chenga used an art to come out of the virtual sky world and removed the restriction. The person who stepped into the room was a man in his 20s. He was tall and looked like a young man, but his face still retained the innocence and gentleness of a teenager. Emo Chenga saw him and asked with a smile, Jinji, what's the matter? This young man was Yi Jinji. He was already 20 years old. His originally cute face was still likable even after he grew up. In addition, he had a good character and treated people generously, so he was very popular among the low-level disciples. In the past 10 years, Emo Chenga didn't hesitate to give him medicinal pills and treasures. He was now in the 10th layer of the aura refining realm and only needed to wait for the school's test to obtain a foundation-building pill. Upon seeing her, Yi Jinji smiled with 2 dimples on his face. Auntie, you're still cultivating. Of course I'm cultivating. Didn't you go to the martial arts hall with Hualing? It's only noon but you're already back? The martial arts hall was a branch hall on the main peak of Shenqing School. It was used for martial arts competitions between disciples. Under normal circumstances, there would be a core formation cultivator and several foundation building cultivators overseeing it to train the disciples' abilities in fights of magical powers. Male disciples were always more interested in fights of magical powers, so they would go to the martial arts hall every few days. Yijinji was the same. After he reached the 10th layer of the aura refining realm, he and his childhood playmate, Hualing, went to the martial arts hall every day to accumulate experience in the foundation building pill test. Mo Chinga thought this was a good thing, so she just let him be. Don't mention it. Yi Jinji sat across from her, looking bored. There weren't many people in the martial arts hall today, so I came back after fighting 2 rounds. Last time, didn't you say Hualing thought of something, and you didn't know how to deal with it? Did you crack it? Of course. Yi Jinji raised his head proudly. What kind of move could Hualing make? I thought about it for 2 days and figured it out. And he watched me. As he spoke, he stood up in high spirits and raised his hands. Almost at the same time, a wind wall spell and a thick earth spell appeared around him. And he looked. I used these 2 spells together, so Hualing's freezing spell and splitting earth spell can't hit me. Mo Chinga smiled. This is indeed a good idea. It's hard for you to think of this. Upon being praised, Yi Jinji felt a bit embarrassed. He withdrew his spell, then sat back down. Auntie, there's something I want to discuss with you. What is it? Tell me. A hesitant expression appeared on Yi Jinji's face. He said hesitantly, I want to take a trip home. Mo Chinga was stunned. Yi Jinji came to the mountain when he was 9 years old and met her when he was 10. Since then she had always kept him by her side and he had never left her side. It had already been 11 years since he left home. After cultivators like them entered a cultivation group, they rarely returned to the secular world. Yi Jinji also never mentioned homesickness, so Mo Chinga also didn't think too much about it. At this moment Yi Jinji's face faintly revealed a melancholic expression. When I left home my mother cried the whole night. Auntie, there's still 1 year left before the Elite Disciples Foundation building pill test. I want to take advantage of this period of time to go home, can I? Upon seeing the child's expectant expression, Mo Chinga didn't say anything. She naturally understood Yi Jinji's feelings. Back then she also felt the same way. However, it wasn't a good thing to be so sentimentally attached to one's family. Auntie. Seeing that she didn't respond, Yi Jinji pleaded again, I'll definitely come back as soon as possible. I just want to go back and take a look. Our Shenqing school doesn't require disciples to sever their ties with the secular world. However, under normal circumstances, you're only allowed to visit your family after you build your foundation. You haven't built your foundation yet and you're in the first year of waiting for the test, so it's really inconvenient for you to leave. Yi Jinji didn't say anything. His face was full of frustration. Mo Chinga thought for a moment, then said to him with a smile, You don't have to be so disappointed. 5 years ago, your grandmaster said he'd let me leave the mountain to travel after I finished my closed-door meditation for 5 years. Now 5 years have passed. After a while, I'll take you back after I finish dealing with some chores. What do you think? Yi Jinji was ecstatic. Auntie, are you happy now? Yi Jinji nodded repeatedly. Thank you, Auntie. After thanking her, he hesitated for a moment. But Auntie, didn't you say you didn't want the clan to know you? Mo Chinga smiled. My surname isn't Yi, so what's the matter? They won't be able to tell. You can just call me Martial Uncle at that time. Yi Jinji was Master Taoist Shoujing's advanced inner disciple in name, so he should call her Martial Uncle. After comforting Yi Jinji, Mo Chinga ended her cultivation and stepped out of the cave. 5 years had passed, and her cultivation level had reached the peak of the middle stage of the foundation building realm. She just needed some fated chances to break through to the late stage of the foundation building realm. However, Mo Chinga wasn't in a hurry. She was only 37 years old now. In terms of age, her cultivation level was already very high. Even Qin Shoujing was only in the middle stage of the foundation building realm when he was her age. She stepped into the main hall of Shangqing Palace. Lord Taoist Jinghe was sitting cross-legged in meditation. He fought with Master Song Feng 5 years ago, so his injuries weren't light. In the past few years he had been recuperating. Fortunately, his cultivation level was high, so his dantian and meridians weren't injured. Mo Chinga stopped not far from him and called out, Master. Lord Taoist Jinghe opened his eyes. You're out of closed-door meditation? Mo Chinga nodded. In the past 5 years she had been locked in her small cave and hadn't come out. Now that she came out, she naturally came out of closed-door meditation. She felt Lord Taoist Jinghe's divine sense sweep over her, but she was very calm. Her soul-refining art was already in the second layer. As long as he didn't deliberately use spiritual aura pressure to suppress her, she could still maintain her composure in front of nascent soul cultivators. After he finished examining her, Lord Taoist Jinghe nodded. Not bad. You're in the peak of the middle stage. Presumably, it won't be a problem for you to break through to the late stage in a few years. You actually practiced the soul-refining art to the second layer? I've never seen such an achievement in just a dozen years. Mo Chenga smiled. It's martial uncle Xianin who's thoughtful. Disciple isn't afraid of chi deviation. Master, how's your injury? I'm fine. Lord Taoist Jinghe waved his hand indifferently. It's almost healed. Old Song Feng must have had a hard time these past few years. At that time, old Taoist Jinyang's meteorite hit him squarely. According to my estimation, he'll have to enter closed-door meditation for at least 10 to 20 years. In this case I've made a profit. Seeing Lord Taoist Jinghe's proud expression, Mo Chenga shook her head helplessly. This master could probably only be serious once in a while. By the way, you just finished your closed-door meditation. The school's minor competition will be held in a few days. Do you want to participate? Mo Chenga hesitated. It's not good for me to go, right? The school's minor competition was mostly attended by ordinary disciples. The aura refining minor competition was related to the foundation building pill, and the foundation building minor competition had other rewards. Generally speaking, elite disciples rarely participated in the minor competition. First, they were rewarded by their masters, so they wouldn't be greedy for that little bit of reward. Second, elite disciples who participated were mostly better than ordinary disciples, so ordinary disciples couldn't get any rewards. Although modesty wasn't a virtue in the cultivation world, there were still considerations in cultivation groups. Lord Taoist Jinghe said indifferently, "What's not good about it? If they lose to you, it's because they're incompetent." Mo Chenga was silent, obviously disapproving. Lord Taoist Jinghe glared at her. "Fine, if you don't want to go, then don't. But you should go and join in the fun. It's good to compare notes with fellow disciples." Mo Chenga agreed, so she nodded. "Yes, master." Mo Chenga knew that although she'd experienced countless battles, she didn't have many fights of magical powers after she built her foundation. Although she participated in the demonic beast riot, she managed to avoid the most chaotic 2 years in the virtual sky world. Moreover, almost all of her fights of magical powers were life-risking battles, so her intuition toward danger was better than ordinary cultivators. However, her skills were probably inferior to cultivators who often compared notes with each other. Now that she hadn't fought in 5 years of closed-door meditation, she should really study fights of magical powers. Mo Chenga walked out of Shangqing Palace and flew the white silk handkerchief to the main peak. The martial arts hall was located next to the 3 Pure Hall on the main peak. Its scale was only slightly inferior to the most magnificent 3 Pure Hall in the whole mountain, which showed how much the school valued it. Mo Chenga walked slowly inside. A disciple guarding the door saluted her. "Grandmaster Mo." She had a certain prestige in Shangqing School now, so these disciples all recognized her. Soon, a supervising disciple came to greet her with a smile. "Grandmaster Mo, did you also come to the martial arts hall to compare notes?" Mo Chenga returned his salute and answered, "I had nothing to do today, so I came to take a look." "Grandmaster, this way please. The foundation building competition is inside." Thank you for your trouble." Mo Chenga followed the supervising disciple through the crowd and entered the inner room under other people's gazes. This outer room was where aura-refining disciples competed. It was presided over by an aura-refining supervising disciple and overseen by 2 foundation-building cultivators. This inner room was where foundation-building disciples competed. There was a core formation cultivator overseeing the competition, and the receptionist was also a foundation-building supervising disciple. The supervising disciple led her to the supervising disciple, then excused himself. The supervising disciple took her identity tablet, recorded it, and said with a smile, "This is Martial Uncle Mo's first time here, right?" Mo Chenga nodded. When she arrived at Shangqing School, she was already in the peak stage of the aura refining realm and was about to build her foundation. After she built her foundation, she immediately encountered the demonic beast riot. When she came back, she became Lord Taoist Jinghe's official disciple. After being tossed around for 5 years, she was in closed-door meditation for 5 years, so she had no time to come to the martial arts hall. The supervising disciple said, "Then I'll take Martial Uncle there." "Thank you." As the supervising disciple led Mo Chenga, he explained, "In fact, the rules of the martial arts hall are very simple. There's a ring in the lobby and anyone can challenge someone. The winner has to stay on the ring and wait for others to challenge him. If you win 3 matches in a row, you can leave the ring. If 2 people want to have a private fight, they have to come to me, get a room identity tablet and go to the wing over there. Of course, a supervising disciple must be present as a witness. A core formation martial uncle oversees the other room. If two people want to fight mercilessly, they have to ask for permission and can only fight under the witness of a core formation martial uncle. Mo Chenga nodded as she listened. This rule was very reasonable. Private fights required a third party to be present to avoid accidents and inexplicable reasons. In addition, if some methods were used to control the enemy, there might be casualties. If one didn't go all out, they wouldn't be able to display their full power, so a core formation cultivator was required to be present to ensure safety. As they talked, they arrived at the lobby. Mo Chenga looked around and saw a wide ring in the center of the lobby. Around 20 to 30 cultivators were either standing or sitting around it. The supervising disciple said, "During the demonic beast riot last time, more than 100 foundation-building martial brothers and sisters from our school died. Now there are less than 200 foundation-building cultivators in our school. Otherwise there would be at least 40 to 50 people here." Mo Chenga noticed the faint melancholy on the supervising disciple's face. Presumably his relatives and friends died in the demonic beast war, so she smiled and said, "The school's junior competition is about to start. Presumably, there will be a large number of foundation-building fellow disciples this time." "You're right." The supervising disciple also smiled. "Martial Uncle Mo, please do as you please. I'll take my leave first." Mo Chenga returned the greeting and watched as the supervising disciple left. She then walked to the edge of the ring and found a place to watch the fight. On the ring were two early-stage foundation-building cultivators. One was a burly man with a curly beard and the other was a thin and weak middle-aged man. Although the burly man was tall, the magic tool he used was a small and exquisite flying sword. As for the middle-aged man, he was holding a fan. The burly man was the main attacker while the middle-aged man was the main defender. The two of them exchanged blows and fought fiercely. After watching for a while, Mo Chenga actually comprehended a few things. For example, the way the burly man controlled his flying sword was more like a concealed weapon. It flew silently, but this required a very long time of practice. As for the middle-aged man, his fan was also mysterious. It was unexpectedly able to guide the burly man's spiritual aura, allowing him to repeatedly avoid danger. After watching with rapt attention for a while, someone patted Mo Chenga's shoulder. She turned around and said with surprise, "Big brother Yi." The person standing next to her with a smile was none other than Yi Jingwen. Yi Jingwen was almost 60 years old now, so he looked a bit older. He had lost some of his sharpness, but he looked a bit more level-headed. 10 years ago, the two of them fought side by side against several cultivators from Gujin sect, so their feelings for each other weren't as superficial as before. However, the two of them were accidentally injured by Lord Daoist Jinghe. Because Mo Chenga's meridians were tough and she was put in the Wenyang pool by Lord Daoist Jinghe, she recovered in just a few days. Yi Jingwen's injuries were more serious than hers. It took him more than a year to completely recover. At that time, Mo Chenga was tormented by Lord Daoist Jinghe every day. The two of them only met a few times in a hurry and didn't even have time to exchange greetings. Later, when she entered closed-door meditation, they didn't see each other for 5 years. Yi Jingwen looked at her with a smile and pointed behind him. The two of them then left the crowd and found chairs in the corner to sit down. After they sat down, Yi Jingwen said with a smile, "Chenga, long time no see." "Yes, I just came out of closed-door meditation yesterday." Yi Jingwen's divine sense swept over her and he asked in surprise, "You've reached the peak of the middle stage." Mo Chenga nodded. "I was lucky. My closed-door meditation this time went very smoothly." Yi Jingwen stared at her expressionless face and sighed. "I heard your aptitude was excellent, but I didn't believe it at first. Now I have to believe it. When I met you, you were only a little girl in the second layer of the aura refining realm. I was already in the foundation building realm, but now you've actually surpassed me." In the past few years, Yi Jingwen's cultivation level had also advanced, but his progress wasn't as obvious as Mo Chenga's. He also spent some time healing his injuries, so he was still a bit behind now. Mo Chenga shook her head and said with a smile, "Big brother Yi, don't laugh at me. I'm only where I am today because of fated chances." If she hadn't met Zhong Muling by chance, she would still have wasted spiritual roots and would probably still be in the early stage of the foundation building realm. After she built her foundation, she didn't have the art of the origin, so even the effect of the art of Sunu was greatly reduced. The spiritual aura she absorbed almost couldn't be retained in her body. Now that she obtained the art of the origin and cultivated in the virtual sky world, she finally understood how big the gap between wasted spiritual roots and geniuses with single or mutated spiritual roots was. If she could only retain 10% of her spiritual aura before, now she could retain 90%. This terrifying 9 times made her realize that if she hadn't met Zhong Muling and obtained the art of the origin, she probably wouldn't have been able to advance to the core formation realm for the rest of her life. Yi Jingwen naturally didn't know about her rueful feelings. Upon hearing her modesty, he gave her a sidelong glance and said, "I told you years ago that fated chances are also strength. Why deny it?" He paused for a moment then asked, "Tiange, did you come to the martial arts hall to compare notes?" "I rarely fought after I built my foundation, so I wanted to compare notes with my fellow disciples and gain some experience in fights of magical powers." "That's not bad. In fights of magical powers, experience is more important than talent. Cultivation geniuses might not be good in fights of magical powers, but cultivation geniuses might not be weak in fights of magical powers if they practice more." "So Big Brother Yi often comes to the martial arts hall?" Amo Chenga asked with interest. She knew Yi Jingwen before, but she didn't have a deep friendship with him and never saw him fight of magical powers. Later, when she met him at Chenmen Ridge in Mount Tianhua and fought side by side, she realized he was also a decisive person. It seemed he was very interested in fights of magical powers. Sure enough, Yi Jingwen nodded. "I usually come to the martial arts hall when I'm free. 4 sword cultivators like us, fighting of magical powers is more important than fighting of magical powers. I'm afraid every sword cultivator is combative, right?" Yi Jingwen couldn't help but smile. "You're right. If I wasn't combative, I wouldn't have chosen to be a sword cultivator." The two of them smiled at each other. After sitting idly for a while, Yi Jingwen said, "Right, since you came here to compare notes and I don't want to go to the ring right now, how about we fight?" "Sure." Amo Chenga naturally couldn't ask for more. Yi Jingwen's fighting strength surpassed that of ordinary middle-stage foundation building cultivators, and he was also very experienced, so he was naturally an excellent opponent. The two of them stood up together and went outside to find a steward. After getting a room number, they were led into a wing room by a steward. Although it was called a wing room, it was, after all, used for fights. It was very spacious and was equivalent to a small ring. The two of them went on the ring. After being confirmed by the steward, they began to exchange blows. Yi Jingwen was a sword cultivator, and sword cultivators paid attention to their attacks. Once the steward confirmed it, his flying sword flew straight towards Amo Chenga's face. Amo Chenga stepped on the white silk handkerchief. She deliberately didn't use it to defend herself, so in a flash she brushed past the flying sword. However, a sword cultivator's flying sword carried sword aura, so when it brushed past her arm, causing her arm to ache. Upon seeing this, Yi Jingwen's flying sword immediately flew back. He condensed his aura on the sword, and in an instant, the sword emitted a dazzling white light that enveloped his entire body. Amo Chenga felt helpless. She retracted the white silk handkerchief and released it. The brick wall blocked the sword light, and the shuttle of flying Apsara flew out. The golden light flew towards Yi Jingwen. The two of them fought back and forth for a while. They only stopped when the steward, who was acting as a witness, clapped his hands and cheered. After walking down the ring, the two of them rested for a while. Yi Jingwen saw that Amo Chenga was lost in thought, so he asked curiously, "What's wrong?" Amo Chenga answered, "I originally didn't want to use that magic weapon, but I don't know how to dodge Big Brother Ye's sword aura." Once she finished speaking, Yi Jingwen laughed. "You're actually thinking about this?" Amo Chenga was puzzled. "Is there a problem?" This time it was the steward who was watching the fight who interrupted. "Martial Uncle Amo, it's very difficult to dodge a sword cultivator's sword aura. This place is so narrow, so they'd naturally choose to use magic tools or spells to block it. It'd naturally be best if Martial Uncle has a magic weapon, so why do you need to dodge it?" Amo Chenga was stunned. She then said with an ashamed expression, "It's my fault. I always thought it was foolproof." Yi Jingwen said, "Tiange, you're very experienced in fights of magical powers. It's just that you haven't adjusted your mentality. You have to know that in fights of magical powers, even if you win a little, it's still a win. You just need to use whatever means you have." "Yes. Thank you for your guidance, Big Brother Yi." Although her cultivation level now surpassed Yi Jingwen's, when it came to fights of magical powers, Amo Chenga knew she still wasn't as good as him, so she thanked him sincerely. Yi Jingwen smiled. "If you have nothing to do, you can come to the martial arts training hall often to fight with me. We can learn from each other and improve together." Chapter 152. Yi Jingwen kept his word. From that day onwards, he and Mo Chenga went to the martial arts hall every day to compare notes on fights of magical powers. He was a sword cultivator, so he was infatuated with comparing skills and was quite knowledgeable about fights of magical powers. Because of that, Mo Chenga's skills in fights of magical powers improved very quickly after sparring with him. More than a month later, relying on the advantage of magic weapons, Mo Chenga was able to win 2 out of 3 matches. Yi Jingwen was greatly stimulated, so he decided to go back and enter closed-door meditation. Thus the 10-year period ended. Lord Taoist Jinghe told Mo Chenga that she had been in closed-door meditation for a long time and her cultivation level was high enough, so she could leave the mountain and travel around. After Mo Chenga finished taking care of her chores, she sealed her immortal's cave and soon left Mount Taikang with Yi Jinji. There were more than 10 countries in the Celestial Pole. Wei country was located in the Midland, with Jin and Yen in the east and Qin and Chu in the west. It was surrounded by powerful enemies. For this reason, the state of Wei provided for several immortal masters and even conferred the title of Marquis to several secluded cultivation clans in order to ensure peace. Several days after they left West Kunwu, Mo Chenga and Yi Jinji arrived at Tong and City in Wei country. Tong and City was not only the largest city in Wei country, but it was also the transportation hub of the entire Celestial Pole. It was located at the junction of the north and south, built by the river, connected to both land and water. In the west it was connected to the Qin Mountains and the Chu lands, and in the east, it reached the Jin and Yen plains. As a result, Tong and City was one of the most prosperous cities in the entire Celestial Pole. The awkward thing was that Yi Jinji was too young when he left home, so he didn't remember where the Yi clan was. Fortunately, the Yi family had the identity of the Marquis of Changningho in Wei country. They asked along the way and quickly found the Yi residence. In Tong and City the east was rich and the west noble, while the south was poor and the north lowly. The Yi family was a noble and lived in the west of the city. The two of them found their way to the west of the city. Vermilion doors and stone lions could be found everywhere. The Yi family was also very conspicuous among these noble families. On the signboard at the door, the words Changningho Manor were written. Upon seeing this, Yi Jinji was very happy. He immediately wanted to go in, but who would have thought that the gatekeeper would stop him and say with an arrogant expression, "This is Marquis Ningho's estate. Unauthorized people are not allowed to enter." Yi Jinji was stunned. Behind him, Mo Chenga couldn't help but want to laugh. In the secular world, most people judged a person by his appearance. Although Yi Jinji looked like a distinguished young man, his clothes were simple and unadorned, and his bearing didn't have the noble air of a young master. These gatekeeping manservants naturally thought he was a commoner, so they never expected he was actually their young master. After being stunned for a moment, Yi Jinji shouted, "What, idler? This is my home. I'm from the Yi family." One of the manservants glanced at him and said in an arrogant tone, "Go, go, go. Don't cause trouble if you have nothing to do." Yi Jinji became anxious and said angrily, "My surname is Yi and my name is Jinji. You guys go and report this to the Marquis." After he reported his name, the manservants looked at him seriously. "His surname is Yi, could it really be? Even if his surname is Yi, we can't say that he's from our family. But what if it is?" The manservants muttered for a while. Finally one of them said, "Wait here, I'll go in and report." Although he agreed, he didn't show any respect. Yi Jinji restrained his temper and looked at Mo Chenga. Seeing that her expression was calm, he reluctantly nodded. After the manservant went in, he walked to Mo Chenga and said apologetically, "Martial uncle, the servants at home don't look good. I'll have to trouble you to wait for a while." Mo Chenga didn't say anything and just smiled. She found it interesting. In fact, people in the cultivation world were also like this. However, they didn't look at other people's clothes, but at their cultivation level. Before long, they heard the sound of hurried footsteps. The two of them looked up and saw an old man wearing an embroidered robe leading the way, followed by a group of people who were rushing to the gate. The manservant who reported the news just now followed behind them, nervously wiping the sweat on his face. Upon seeing this old man, Mo Chenga guessed his identity. Sure enough, as soon as Yi Jinji saw this person, an excited and hesitant expression appeared on his face. He left home when he was 9 years old, and it had been more than 11 years since then. The child from back then had already become a young man, but when he saw his elders, he felt shy. A noblewoman rushed out of the crowd. She staggered forward regardless of the pearls and jades on her body. As soon as Yi Jinji saw her, he was stunned. The woman threw herself at him, hugged his head and cried bitterly. You're finally back. Yi Zhenji's lips trembled. After a long time he finally called out, Mother. He also shed silent tears. Mo Qianga stood behind them, watching the family reunite after a long separation and greeting each other with tears. She sighed inwardly. This was also her family. It was just that she didn't have any kinship with them, so she kept herself out of it. After a long time Yi Zhenji finally met all his relatives. Remembering that she was still on the side, he hastily wiped the tears on his face and came to her. Martial uncle, this is my family. Upon hearing him calling her martial uncle, everyone in Yi clan hurriedly changed their expressions and looked at her. Mo Qianga had already swept them with her divine sense. There were several cultivators among the people of Yi clan, but their spiritual roots were quite weak. The one with the highest cultivation level was only in the third layer of the aura refining realm. He was the old man who took the lead. When these cultivators sensed her hidden cultivation level, they all had respectful expressions on their faces. They asked Yi Zhenji just now and knew his cultivation level was in the 10th layer of the aura refining realm. Since he called her martial uncle, they knew Mo Qianga must be a cultivator in the foundation building realm or higher. Although she looked like she was only 18 or 19 years old, they didn't dare to neglect her. Martial uncle, let me introduce you. This is my grandpa, Yi Zhenji said as he led Mo Qianga to the old man who took the lead. This old man had gray hair, but he was in good spirits. After all, he was a third-layer aura refining cultivator and had lived in the secular world for many years, so he was very experienced. He cupped his hands respectfully. This old man is Yi Qing, the head of Yi clan. Greetings to senior. So this was the Yi Qing second uncle mentioned. In terms of seniority he was several generations lower than her. Mo Qianga calmly accepted his greeting and nodded in return. Yi Zhenji continued to lead her to the next middle-aged man. This is my father. Junior Yi Zhuan greets senior. This person was also a cultivator, but his cultivation level was only in the first layer of the aura refining realm. Yi Zhenji then pointed at the woman who hugged him and cried bitterly a moment ago and said, This is my mother. The noble woman bowed with a grateful expression. I can't thank senior enough for taking care of my family's Mo Qianga finally raised her hand. Madam, you don't need to be so polite. Since I'm his master's elder, I naturally have to take care of him. Soon after, several other people saluted her one by one. After a long time the greetings were finally over. Yi Qing cautiously invited Mo Qianga to sit in the hall and dismissed the unnecessary people, leaving only a few important people to sit with her. Once they were seated, Yi Qing said to Yi Zhenji, why don't you introduce this martial uncle of yours? When Yi Zhenji met his relatives before, he only said that Mo Qianga was his martial uncle and that she took good care of him. This time he wanted to go down the mountain, so she especially brought him here. Upon hearing what Yi Zhenji said, Yi Zhenji hastily stood up. Grandpa Patriarch, this martial uncle, is my Grandmaster Jinghe's last disciple. My master has always been in closed-door meditation, so it's always martial uncle Mo who's been teaching me. She's really my teacher. Oh. Upon hearing what he said, everyone in the hall looked at Mo Qianga in a different light. In other words, although she was a martial uncle, she was no different from a master. Moreover, she was the last disciple of a nascent soul grandmaster at Shenqing School. From this, it could be seen how talented she was and how honorable her status was. Weak cultivators like them who couldn't stay in Kunwood definitely couldn't imagine her. Yi Qing once again stood up. Turns out senior has such a great kindness toward my Zhener. This old man thanks senior here. No need to be like this, Mo Qianga said with a smile. Zhenji is a sensible and well-mannered child. Although he's lacking in talent, he's diligent and studious. Sooner or later he'll become a great person. Yi Qing was very excited to hear Mo Qianga's evaluation. If he can become a great person, it's his good fortune and also thanks to senior. After the two of them chatted like that, Yi Qing asked again, Senior, do you have something to do in the secular world? Although this old man's cultivation level is low, I have some status in the secular world. Maybe I can help senior inquire about some information. I didn't come to the secular world for anything important. I just came out to travel. I see. Senior, you rarely come to the secular world, right? Our Yi clan has lived in the secular world for a long time, so we know a lot of strange things in the secular world. If senior doesn't mind, this old man can introduce a thing or two to senior. Yi Qing was very enthusiastic. Mo Qianga thought for a moment, then nodded with a smile. Then I'll have to trouble you. It's no trouble, no trouble. Yi Qing said, Senior must be tired since you came all the way from Kunwu. How about staying at my place for the time being? Later on, this old man will deliver all the information my family has gathered to you. Mo Chinga originally didn't have the patience to deal with people like this, so she immediately agreed and left first. After watching Mo Chinga leave, Yi Ching suddenly asked, what's the identity of this martial uncle of yours? Yi Jinji was startled and somewhat frightened. Grandpa Patriarch, she's my martial uncle. She's a foundation building cultivator? Yes. Martial uncle has been in closed-door meditation for 5 years and has just reached the peak of the middle stage of the foundation building realm. Now, Grandmaster ordered her to leave the mountain to travel. She's training her mental state so that she can break through to the late stage of the foundation building realm. I see. Yi Ching frowned slightly. How old is this senior? How's her aptitude? She's only in the foundation building realm, but your nascent soul Grandmaster actually accepted her as a disciple? Yi Jinji saw that Yi Ching didn't look suspicious, so he calmed down and answered, Martial uncle, she should be 37 years old. I'm not very clear about her spiritual roots, but I know it's a very special kind of spiritual roots that aren't inferior to single spiritual roots. 37 years old? Yi Ching was astonished. 37 years old, and her cultivation level was in the peak of the middle stage of the foundation building realm. No wonder she could be accepted as a disciple by a nascent soul cultivator. She must be a genius. How's your relationship with your martial uncle? Yi Jinji thought for a moment then answered, Ever since I entered my master's tutelage, martial uncle taught me personally, so it's not wrong to say martial uncle is my master. Then does your martial uncle have other disciples? No. Martial uncle is still young, so he only taught me on behalf of my master. He doesn't have any disciples. Upon hearing this, Yi Ching pondered for a moment while stroking his beard. All of a sudden he cautiously said, from now on, you have to get closer to your martial uncle. With her current age and cultivation level, as well as the last disciple of a nascent soul grandmaster, she'll certainly have a bright future. You'll definitely benefit from being on good terms with her. Yi Jinji knew Grandpa Patriarch's words were for his sake, but it really made him unhappy. He was close to his aunt from the start, so it wasn't because of any benefits. Grandpa Patriarch, martial uncle sincerely treats me well, and I also sincerely respect her. Rest assured, my relationship with martial uncle has always been very good. Chapter 153. Knock knock. 2 soft pecking sounds came from outside the door. Mo Chinga stopped cultivating. She swept the door with her divine sense and removed the restriction outside. Please come in. The one who pushed the door open was Yi Jinji's mother, Madame Yen. Madame Yen brought 4 maids with her. She smiled before saying anything. Senior, did I disturb you? Mo Chinga had a good impression of this Madame Yen, probably because her maternal love for Yi Jinji reminded her of her own mother. Nothing. Is something the matter, madam? Oh, it's like this. The guest room is simple and crude, and I'm afraid Senior won't be used to it. As she spoke, she signaled the maids to put down the things in their hands. Mo Chinga glanced at them. They were all flashy but impractical things used by rich people, so she shook her head. Madam, you don't have to be so polite. It's not good for cultivators like us to pay too much attention to external objects. These things are useless to me, so Madam doesn't need to worry about them. Senior is an honored guest of my Yi clan. I'm afraid I'm not good enough. Mo Chinga smiled faintly. I understand Madam's intention, but these external objects are really unnecessary. Seeing how determined she was, Madame Yen had no choice but to order all the maids to leave. However, after hesitating for a moment, Madame Yen still smiled and said, I have something to tell Senior. I don't know if it's convenient for Senior. Madam, if you have something to say, just say it. With her permission, Madame Yen ordered the maids to leave first and stayed alone. Senior, I shouldn't disturb your cultivation for such a trivial matter, but I'm a mother, so I always want to know more about my son. Madame Yen paused nervously for a moment before continuing, You're Zhen'er's martial uncle, and you've spent a lot of time with Zhen'er in the past 10 years. However, I haven't been able to see him for such a long time. Senior, are you willing to tell me about Zhen'er? How has he been all these years? Has he suffered any grievances? How is he now? Mo Chinga had no reason to refuse such a small request. A mother whose child had been away from her for 11 years was naturally eager to know more about her child. Madam, you don't need to worry. Jinji is doing very well. He's an advanced inner disciple of a core formation cultivator, so he'll be fine. Really? Does he have friends in the sect? Were you bullied? Mo Chenga chuckled. His grandmaster is Lord Daoist Jinghe. Who would dare to bully him? Moreover, if you want to bully him, I won't ignore it. Don't worry, madam. This child has a gentle personality and is very popular. That's good. Madame Yen was gratified. Jin has been sensible since he was a child. If there is anything wrong, he definitely won't tell us. I was worried about this, so I came to disturb Senior. Senior Jin has already reached the 10th layer of qi refining. Why did he choose to leave the sect at this time? Upon seeing Madame Yan's worried expression, Mo Chenga explained, I originally wanted to wait until he built his foundation before letting him come back on his own. But Jinji really missed you guys, so he begged you for a long time. Coincidentally, I was ordered by my master to leave the mountain, so I sent him here directly. So that's how it is. Madame Yan's gaze swept over Mo Chenga, then she suddenly asked, Senior, you look so young. May I know how old you are? This question was indeed a bit abrupt, so Mo Chenga was startled. Her age wasn't something she couldn't say, so she answered, I'm 37 years old now. Senior's age is similar to mine, but you look like a 17 or 18-year-old girl. You really make mortals like me envious. In fact, Madame Yan's appearance was already quite young. Yi Jinji happened to be 20 years old, and Madame Yan was his birth mother, so she must be at least 35 years old. However, she took good care of herself, so there weren't any wrinkles on her face. She looked like she was in her 30s, which was the age when women were most mature and charming. Mo Chenga didn't flatter her back. Instead, her sharp gaze swept over Madame Yan's face and she asked faintly, Madam, what do you mean? If she couldn't hear the hidden meaning behind Madame Yan's words, she'd be too slow. Sure enough, this Madame Yan's intention wasn't that simple. Being stared at like this, Madame Yan was a bit embarrassed. She stammered, It's nothing. Senior's age is similar to mine, but you look about the same age as Jin, so I really can't tell. You're his elder. Presumably, if I said your brother and sister, other people would also believe it? Mo Chenga suddenly felt like she didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This Madame Yan was obviously worried that there was some unexplainable relationship between her and Yi Jinji. Nevertheless, Mo Chenga's expression didn't change. She just stared straight at Madame Yan. Madame Yan was only a mortal. Under Mo Chenga's inadvertent spiritual aura pressure, she had no ability to resist at all, causing her to break out in a cold sweat. She hastily grabbed a handkerchief to wipe her sweat, but she couldn't even lift her hand. With great difficulty she said, Senior, if I offended you in any way, please forgive me. Madame Yan recklessly speculated about her relationship with Yi Jinji. Although she was Yi Jinji's mother, it still made Madame Yan feel displeased, so she deliberately acted like this. Now that Madame Yan saw that Madame Yan was showing weakness, she withdrew her spiritual aura pressure and said coldly, For cultivators like us, looks are merely the bones beneath the skin. Madam, you shouldn't say such things in the future. Madame Yan naturally didn't dare to refute her. She recalled the clan head's instruction to treat this senior well. Her behavior just now might have already offended the other party, so she repeatedly apologized. Senior, please forgive me for offending you. I'm just an ignorant woman who didn't know about cultivators' taboos and spoke nonsense. Mo Chenga interrupted her. Madam, you're Jinji's mother, so there are some things you have the right to ask clearly. If you don't ask clearly, presumably you also won't feel at ease, right? That being the case, if there's anything you want to say, just say it. Madame Yan finally calmed down a bit when she heard no anger in Mo Chenga's tone. Upon seeing Mo Chenga's calm demeanor, Madame Yan couldn't help but feel ashamed. Senior, please forgive me. I really saw that you and Jinji have a close relationship, so I was afraid that child would make a mistake. You're his martial uncle. If that child doesn't understand things, wouldn't he implicate you and ruin your clean reputation? She spoke politely, but this Madame Yan wasn't someone who didn't understand things. Mo Chenga softened her tone. Madam, Yi clan has been in the secular world for more than 20 years, right? Have you ever been to Kunwal? Madame Yan was startled, but she soon nodded. When she married into Yi clan was already Marquis Chaininghao in Wei country, so she naturally hadn't been to Kunwal. It's no wonder you don't know about the cultivation world. In the cultivation world, there's no such thing as human relationships in the secular world. Everything is determined by cultivation levels. Regarding dual cultivation, seniority and age have nothing to do with other people. No matter who Jinji likes, it won't affect his future. Upon seeing Madame Yan's complexion turn pale, Emo Chinga smiled and continued, "Besides, how can one's age be accurately determined based on one's appearance? That master of mine is more than 800 years old, but he looks like he's only in his 30s. Jinji's master also looks similar to Jinji's age. Madam, Jinji respects me as his master, so how could there be anything embarrassing? Madam, please don't think too much. Otherwise, if Jinji finds out, he'll inevitably be sad and embarrassed." Madame Yan's face turned green then white, but she couldn't say anything. She was just a mortal woman. How could she know anything about the cultivation world? As a mother, she was just worried about her child. Emo Chinga's straightforwardness made her feel too ashamed to show her face. "Alright, I'm going to continue cultivating. Madam, it's rare for Jinji to come home, so you'd better spend more time with him." Emo Chinga straightforwardly sent the guest off, then sat cross-legged and closed her eyes, looking as if she didn't want to say anything. Madame Yen bowed embarrassedly then retreated. Emo Chinga didn't care too much about this matter. This Madame Yen was a mortal woman, so it was understandable that she didn't understand. Mortals always thought that when men and women were the same age, even if they had different seniority, something was bound to happen. However, they didn't know that in the cultivation world, judging people by their age was the most ridiculous thing. Emo Chinga cultivated until the evening. Yi Ching, the patriarch of Yi clan, sent someone to invite her, saying she came from afar and that they were holding a banquet to thank her master in Jinji's stead. Emo Chinga thought about it but still went to the banquet. Before his death, second uncle entrusted her to take care of Yi clan when she had the ability. Now that she came to Yi clan, doing something within her ability was also something she ought to do. "Senior, you're finally here. Please sit, please sit." As soon as Emo Chinga arrived at the banquet hall, Yi Ching enthusiastically welcomed her. A banquet table was already set up in the hall. Golden cups and silver cups could be seen, and the place was resplendent. "Martial uncle." Yi Jinji also came over. Emo Chinga smiled at him. This was a private banquet, so there weren't many people present. Aside from Yi Ching, Yi Jinji, and Yi Jinji's father, Yi Juan, there were 4 other people. All of them were cultivators, but their cultivation levels were only in the first or second layer. 2 of them were middle-aged, 1 was a young man and 1 was a teenager. Yi Ching introduced them one by one. "Senior, these are my Yi clan's good-for-nothing juniors, Yi Mao, Yi Yu, Yi Bing, and Yi Dun." Yi Mao and Yi Yu were the 2 middle-aged men. Judging from their seniority, they should be in the same generation as Yi Ching. Yi Bing was the young man. His name was in the same generation as Yi Juan, but Yi Dun didn't know his seniority. However, according to Yi clan's naming convention, Yi Jinji was an exception. Emo Chinga didn't know whether it was because he was placed high hopes on him since he was a child. Junior greets senior. All the cultivators of Yi clan were extremely respectful. Emo Chinga was impatient with these things, so she said, "We're all cultivators, so we can dispense with these common customs." Yi Ching noticed she wasn't happy, so he hastily stopped her and said with a smile, "In that case, we'll do as senior said. You can all take your seats." Everyone from Yi clan took their respective seats. Yi Ching gave the order to start the banquet, and a maid immediately came forward to open the lids of the bowls. Delicacies from the land and the sea were all extremely luxurious. Yi Ching said humbly, "This old man knows senior has already transcended the mortal world. It's just that we've been in the secular world for a long time, so we can't bring out anything good. Although these foods are from the secular world, they can still be considered delicious." Emo Chinga smiled faintly. "Patriarchy, you don't have to be so polite." "Yes, Grandpa Patriarch," Yi Jinji said. "Martial uncle won't blame us." Seeing this, Yi Ching couldn't help but criticize him. "Child, no one will blame you for being too polite." Yi Jinji wasn't convinced. Just as he was about to say something, Emo Chinga stopped him and said with a smile, "Your Grandpa Patriarch is right. If you want to interact with others, you'd better behave like this. But there's no need for that today. Patriarchy, I watched Jinji grow up, so I don't treat you as outsiders. You can dispense with these empty formalities." Upon hearing the words, "I don't treat you as outsiders," Yi Ching instantly felt comfortable. He smiled and nodded repeatedly. "Yes, yes. Since senior said so, we'll do as you say." Soon after, everyone persuaded Emo Chinga to drink some wine and began to chat with her. Yi clan had left Kunwo for several decades. Now that they suddenly met a foundation-building senior, they naturally had a lot of things to ask about cultivation. The teenager called Yi Dun in particular, still had the temperament of a child, so he wasn't as reserved as the adults. If he had any questions, he just opened his mouth and asked. He was reprimanded by his elders, but after seeing Mo Chenga kindly answering all of their questions, the elders finally let him go. Gradually, under the control of Yi Dun and Yi Jinji, the adults also relaxed. This way the guests and the hosts were both happy. By the way, Senior. When they were almost done talking about cultivation, Yi Ching suddenly said, "There's one thing Junior doesn't quite understand, so I'd like to ask Senior." "Please ask." Yi Ching looked quite hesitant, but in the end he asked, "I saw that the spirit tool Senior gave Jin, didn't seem to be an ordinary one. May I know where Senior obtained it?" Mo Chenga was stunned, but she immediately understood what he wanted to ask. The spirit tool in Yi Jinji's hand was the greenwood sword, right? This sword came from Yi clan, so this patriarch of Yi clan had probably seen it before. She glanced at Yi Jinji, but Yi Jinji lightly shook his head, indicating that he didn't say anything. Mo Chenga smiled and said, "This thing came from a good friend of mine. It's a family heirloom." Yi Ching looked surprised. He asked eagerly, "May I ask Senior, what's your friend's name and where is she now?" Mo Chenga was slightly surprised. "Her surname is Yi and her name is Xiaotian." "What? Does Patriarch Yi know her?" Yi Ching was stunned again. "Her surname is Yi, but why is her name Xiaotian? There's no such person in the clan." "Then what about your friend's age and cultivation level?" "She's about the same age as me, but she's already in the foundation building realm." The more Yi Ching asked, the more baffled he became. This doesn't match at all. He wouldn't be surprised if she said she bought this greenwood sword from somewhere, but she said it was Yi Xiaoyan's family heirloom, and she was even a young foundation building cultivator. Mo Chenga seemed to suddenly remember something. "Right, my friend was originally from a cultivation clan. Later, her clan declined and she moved to the secular world. Could it be?" Yi Cheng's eyes brightened. "That sounds like our clan, but I'm not familiar with this name." Mo Chenga thought for a moment then said, "She originally had an uncle named Yi Jiang. Do you know him, Patriarch Yi?" Upon hearing this name, everyone in Yi clan became excited. They looked at each other and saw surprise and doubt in each other's eyes. In the end, Yi Ching asked, "Senior Yi Jiang? Are you sure that's his name?" "Of course." Mo Chenga's heart was clear, but she pretended to be calm. "I remember she said Yi clan used to be a cultivation clan in Mount Qingming. Her father was the most talented cultivator in Yi clan. Back then his name shook Western Kunwo. He successfully formed his gold core when he was only 100 years old. Patriarch Yi, is this true? Yi clan's most talented cultivator successfully formed his gold core when he was 100 years old." Yi Ching muttered with a fanatical look in his eyes. Of course he remembered. When he was born, it was the Yi family's golden age. That genius cultivator brought honor to the Yi family that they had never had before. But later, Yi Zhuan took over the conversation. He was the most outstanding cultivator in Yi clan. His name was Hai. Correct. Mo Chenga smiled. That being the case, the clan my friend was talking about was your Yi clan. This is really fate. Unfortunately, I haven't seen my friend for a long time. I don't know where she is now, so I can't tell her. After all, Yi Ching was the patriarch. After his excitement, he was now full of doubts. But, our granduncle didn't leave any descendants? I'm not sure about that. Mo Chenga simply pushed the matter aside. She wanted to play the role of an outsider, so she naturally couldn't say too much about some things. Everyone in Yi clan looked at each other and gradually calmed down. That's right. That granduncle didn't leave any descendants, so how could there be a cultivator from Yi clan? In the end, Yi Ching said, "Senior, do you know how your friend's uncle is now? Can you get in touch with him?" Upon hearing this question, Mo Chenga's eyes flashed with a hint of hidden sorrow. She said faintly, "Her uncle has already passed away." What? Everyone in Yi clan was startled. Yi Zhuan cried out involuntarily, "How could that be? That granduncle is only a little over 300 years old, right? According to the lifespan of a foundation-building cultivator, he should still be alive." Correct. It's more appropriate to say that her uncle died because of his death. Mo Chenga's gaze fell on the void with an indifferent expression. The two of them were being chased by other cultivators. In order to protect her, her uncle was seriously injured, so his lifespan was sharply reduced. That's why he passed away. After she finished speaking, the hall became silent. Yi Cheng's expression was gloomy. This kind of thing happened too often in the cultivation world. Individual cultivators without any backing were very likely to encounter this kind of thing. In other words, the last real cultivator in Yi clan was also gone? Then didn't Yi clan really become a mediocre clan in the secular world? Even when they were forced to move out of Mount Qingming, Yi Qing didn't have this kind of desolate feeling back then. He always felt that Yi clan was different from those so-called cultivation clans in the secular world because they still had a foundation-building elder who was still alive. But it was only now that he knew that foundation-building elder had already passed away. After thinking for a long time, Yi Qing finally closed his eyes and sighed. He was already more than 70 years old. Although as a cultivator, it wouldn't be a problem for him to live to more than 100 years old, he was, after all, old. He originally thought that if Zhener was successful and got in touch with that granduncle, Yi clan would still have a chance to return to Kunwu. But now, even if Zhener could build his foundation, how could Yi clan return to Kunwu without an experienced cultivator? Besides, it was still unknown whether Zhener could build his foundation or not. Could it be that Yi clan would really decline in his hands? Senior, is this true? Of course it's true. Mo Qingga's expression was indifferent. Yi Xinji was the only one who noticed the sadness under her expressionless face. He gently touched her, then called out in a low voice, "Martial uncle?" Mo Qingga shifted her gaze and smiled at him. There was a meaning in her smile that Yi Xinji couldn't understand. Yi Qing muttered, "So, our Yi clan can't return to Mount Qingming?" He suddenly cheered up. "Senior, that friend of yours, has he really built his foundation now? Can you contact him?" "I can't." Mo Qingga flatly refused. "Patriarch Yi, my friend, promised uncle that when he forms his gold core, she'll give Yi clan a certain amount of help. However, it's best if Yi clan doesn't return to Kunwu. You have to know that enjoying glory and splendor in the secular world is much happier than being weak and living in Kunwu in constant danger." That you're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.